I imagine you've already seen stalker stories, but this one is on another level. The boy saved a mermaid when he was a child, and after that he became friends with her. After some time he had to move away from the island where he lived and ended up losing contact. But when he reached his teenage years, she returned. At first, our protagonist was happy, but what was supposed to be a dream ended up becoming a nightmare. She had the power to appear anywhere there was water. It didn't matter if it was in the bathtub, in a puddle of water, or even inside a small bottle. She was always everywhere chasing him. And worst of all, that mermaid didn't want him to interact with anyone. And if she happened to see him talking to another girl, the mermaid promised she would kill her. This is a series that I carefully picked for you guys. It is very good and has many chapters, so if you like it, I can bring the continuation. Without further delay, let's get to the video. In a distant memory, a woman hugs the protagonist tenderly as he says goodbye. The young man feels her touch on his face, peacefully accepting his final fate. The sensation of drowning wakes him up in fright, making the boy scream. It was all a nightmare, and he finds himself back in his usual lonely reality. The scene changes to a doctor's office, where a voice comments that it has been a while since he last appeared. Then the doctor asks how things are going for him at the university. She then suggests that they continue the conversation from where they left off last time. But because of the rain, she writes that today's session will be done on paper. At that moment, the doctor asks him to tell more about the friend he mentioned earlier. The protagonist reflects that, although it may sound crazy, his first friend was a mermaid. Seeing a painting on the office wall, he starts to remember the past. In a flashback, the boy runs along the beach, shouting that one of his comrades was caught. He looks excited, wanting to know what will happen next in this game. The little one reached 3,000 meters deep in the sea. Smiling, he warns the divers not to worry about him. And so Haishang safely reached the cave, passing through the rocky entrance. But as he stops at the entrance, the boy falls silent, sensing something strange in the air. Suddenly, he hears a noise coming from inside and gets scared by the sound. The boy realizes that someone else is there, as he hears the voice of a crying child. He hesitates, wondering if he should go back and tell the adults what he heard. But curiosity speaks louder, and he enters the darkness to investigate. The scene cuts to a funeral, where a woman cries over the loss of her husband. In a corner, the protagonist weeps, for that was his father. Back in the cave, Haishang approaches the person and asks if she is okay. Shocked, he shines a light on the place and sees a mermaid's tail trapped in a fishing net. Looking up, he finds a crying girl, realizing she is a mermaid. The creature suddenly faints, and the boy runs away from there completely terrified. The scene shifts to a beautiful day in the ocean, with the sun shining brightly on the clear waters. The mermaid, now free from the net, emerges on the water's surface, looking confused. Haishang is on a nearby rock, holding the net that had trapped her, watching her. He is happy that she woke up and explains that he gave her his shirt because she looked cold. With a smile on his face, the boy asks if she is really a mermaid. She confirms, and he gets excited, promising to keep the secret and asking to be her friend. Haishang then lies down and tries to ask why she was crying, but gives up halfway. The boy asks her name, but the mermaid replies that she doesn't have one. He becomes thoughtful about her answer. Then he suggests the name Yun Hai, and the girl repeats it, a little surprised. He explains that the name means sun and sea, and she ends up agreeing. Haishang extends his hand to her, saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Seeing her confusion, the boy says, "You just need to take my hand." They shake hands, and he explains that it's for them to get along well. The doctor asks if he wasn't afraid of her, and the young man says that on his island, there were no other children his age. That's why that mermaid friend became the most precious person to him. The time they spent together was simply unforgettable for the boy. At another moment, the boy says, "I'm about to throw up from so much nausea." He spits out the food, complaining that everything she brings is salty. Unlike her sweetness, Yunhei becomes sad and says that if she were human, she would bring something tasty for him too. Desperate, Haishang asks her not to say something like that, leaving the girl confused. He then reveals that he actually wanted to be a mermaid like her, just to be able to swim well. The boy confesses that, unlike his appearance, he is actually afraid of water. At that moment, Yunhei looks at him and asks why he is so afraid of entering the sea. He then tells her that his father died in a boat accident. With a sad expression, the boy asks what will happen to him now. The mermaid then asks if he would still be afraid if they went into the water together. He hesitates at the edge, asking if she will save him, and the mermaid assures him that she won't let him drown. Haisung enters the water, and even though she offers help, he says it's okay, but suddenly something pulls him down, as if hands were grabbing him from the bottom. A horrible memory comes to mind, and the boy panics, shouting, "I'm scared." In shock, he returns to reality and clings to the mermaid, completely desperate with the situation. The two are face to face, and she asks worriedly if he is feeling well. Still trembling a lot, the boy says, "Please, hold my hand." Their hands join underwater, and she helps him float safely. He gets startled as he floats, but Yunhai squeezes his hand, assuring him that everything is fine. Calmly, the mermaid asks him to look, trying to divert his attention from fear. She then tells him that he is swimming, showing that he has overcome his fear. In the deepest part, she asks if he is afraid, but the boy denies it, since she is holding him. The mermaid reveals that she also doesn't have a father, and the two comfort each other for having one another. Back in the present, he writes that he was sent to his uncle's house after his mother got hurt. In another memory, he says goodbye on the beach, warning that it might be the last time they see each other. The boy explains that there is no sea in Seoul, and Yoon-hae warns him about a slippery rock. He agrees to get closer, but his face shows the sadness of the imminent farewell. With a trembling voice, he says that despite everything, she will always be his best friend. As a farewell gift, the boy places his toy submarine in the water. He shouts that he is leaving the toy for her and that she should go get it quickly. 6 years have passed, and the protagonist, now in high school, remembers his farewell. In the bathroom, he gets irritated, thinking that something is wrong with him for not forgetting her. Then he goes to the sink and starts washing his hands to try to cool his head. The boy splashes water on his face, hoping to drive away the memories for good, but suddenly ghostly hands grab him from inside the sink, leaving him terrified. He screams desperately, telling the thing to let him go while trying to break free from its grip. A figure emerges from the darkness, and he is startled to hear a voice calling his name. With a gentle touch, the person asks him to hold her hands, like in the old days. Terrified, the memory of that touch makes him remember when he held the mermaid's hand. He can't believe what he sees and whispers her name, wondering if it's Yoon-hae. Then his hands are pulled, and Yoon-hae herself emerges from the water right in front of him. She hugs him tightly, saying that she missed him very much during all those years. Now the two face each other in the bathroom, and she calls his name in a soft tone. With tears in her eyes, she asks why he is crying and if she made him sad. The protagonist only replies no, still unable to believe that she is there in his sink. With a smile, he explains that he is crying out of happiness for finally seeing her again. He sits by the bathtub and asks if she isn't going to tell him. The boy moves closer and wants to know how the hell she managed to get there. She repeats that she came simply because she missed him so much all this time. He gets all embarrassed and says that wasn't what he meant by his question. The protagonist wonders if she used to be that straightforward in the past. With that, he asks if now he will be able to see her anywhere he is. Yoon-hae confirms that yes, and disappears into the water, leaving him shocked by the answer. Frightened, he looks at the empty bathtub and calls her, but she doesn't answer anymore. Suddenly, he feels a cold touch on his cheek, coming from behind him. The mermaid appears out of nowhere and pinches his cheek, repeating that she can go anywhere. He gets startled by the appearance and says that he thought she had gone away again, but suddenly a loud knock on the door interrupts their conversation. A voice shouts from the other side, and he asks Yoon-hae to meet him tomorrow at the same time. The countdown ends and the woman outside slaps him in the face. As she leaves, she shouts that he should live in the bathroom given how long he takes. Back in his room, he lies down deep in thought until his younger sister quietly calls him. She asks if he is okay since she heard screams, but he says it was nothing serious. The two sleep in separate beds divided by a simple curtain in the middle of the room. He vents that he wishes their aunt would disappear, but that they just need to endure a little longer. The protagonist thinks that before he felt hopeless, but now everything seems different to him. With a slight smile, he realizes that the days he longed for have finally arrived. The scene shifts to the teacher's room, where one of them asks what his relationship with others was like. The teacher tries to connect, saying that he also lost his father, and asks if he feels unmotivated. Leaving the room, he keeps thinking about it until some classmates call him. Two friends appear in the hallway, one wanting to play soccer and the other wanting to go to the cafeteria. Already with his friends, they talk about a bet the other class made on the soccer game. Suddenly, two girls appear, and one of them, with pink hair, greets him. He is surprised to hear that she knows him, and she says that he is famous for being handsome. His friends hug him, and the group invites him to a VIP event on April 28th. The protagonist looks confused and asks if that date isn't the same as the school exams, but his friends tell him not to worry, since he's already the second best in the class. With that, he refuses the invitation, thanking them kindly but saying he won't be able to go. His friends say goodbye and walk down the hallway, leaving the two girls behind. The friend tells Yoon-sol that he is a nice guy, and that the two of them would make a great match. Determined, she tells her friend to change the plans to the 29th. The friend agrees and says that she will find a way. Among his classmates, the protagonist reflects that for some reason, people have always seen him as someone very mature. However, he only wanted to make his mother proud, who could barely survive. He only cared about his mother, who was sick in a hospital bed, and it was at that moment that his uncle appeared, inviting him to live in his house. The scene shows an argument, with the aunt furious that he brought the children there. She shouts that she is not running a daycare, while the two siblings hide in fear. The couple then turns to them with a frightening look, ordering them to call her aunt. The new aunt proved to be cruel, forcing the little sister to eat even though she was full. She hits the girl's head with chopsticks, making the child scream in pain. The brother hugs her, begging please don't cry, trying to muffle the sound. The aunt then threatens them, telling them to stay quiet or they will be thrown out of the house. But the little girl can't stand it, and starts crying, and the woman mocks her pain. The aunt starts hitting the boy, who curls up to protect his sister from the blows. The uncle only says for him to apologize and not anger the woman, offering no help. With all that pressure, the boy felt like he was going insane. No matter how much he endured or studied, nothing seemed to change for the better. He even thought about giving up everything and joining his deceased father, but it was in those moments that Yoon-hae appeared to talk and give him support. Back in the present, he thanks Yoon-hae for everything, leaving her confused. He explains that his life was miserable and that he wished to see her every day. The mermaid then replies that she felt the same way, leaving the boy surprised. She says that if he hadn't gone to the cave, she wouldn't be who she is today, changing her life. He becomes emotional, remembering how long it has been since they met. Yoon-hae then asks if the woman who yelled at him is the cause of his miserable life. He explains that she isn't the only one to blame, but she is the main one responsible for everything. The boy promises that he will leave home when he becomes an adult, so he can spend more time with her. With that, the mermaid wants to know if he would be happier if the aunt weren't around. He thinks for a moment and answers sincerely that yes, it would be much better. Although it seems strange, he confesses that he has wished many times for his aunt to disappear. He fears she will think he is strange for thinking that way, but Yoon-hae just listens attentively. With a subtle smile, she simply says that she got the message and dives back into the sea. The next morning, his sister asks who he was talking to last night in the kitchen. He serves her breakfast, telling the girl to put away her phone so they can eat. While they eat, the sister comments that the aunt left a while ago and wonders if she's okay. But the boy says she's probably drinking and that they should enjoy the peace before she comes back. Later that night, he was already suspicious of something when a noise suddenly woke him up. He covers his head, wondering why his aunt drank so much whenever she was stressed. But then the noise stops, and he reflects that he doesn't understand why she chose to live that way. When leaving the room, the boy sees the house completely messy, wondering how the aunt left it like that. He then goes to the bathroom and notices that the bathtub still hasn't been emptied. With a strange feeling, the boy approaches the bathtub to take a look. He sees strands of red hair in the drain and remembers having cleaned the bathtub yesterday. The protagonist goes to the shoe cabinet and confirms that the aunt really didn't leave the house. An image shows the aunt sinking into the ocean, indicating that something terrible happened to her. The scene changes, and Yoon-hae suggests that they go to the island. Surprising the boy, she says that he needs to relax, but he argues that he has neither time nor money to go. But the mermaid says that he does, and reveals that she can connect the bathtub water to the sea. He asks if he would also be able to pass through that connection, and she confirms that yes. The boy stays silent for a moment, thinking about something before answering. Then he asks if by any chance she saw his aunt, since she hasn't come back for a while. Yoon-hae replies that no, explaining that she only appears when he calls her. He understands that she can only come out if he is nearby, which clears her of guilt. With a sigh of relief, the protagonist thanks the heavens that she wasn't involved. Suddenly, loud knocks on the door scare them both, and he goes to answer the intercom. A strange and intimidating man appears, asking where Kim Mi-young, his aunt, is. The boy replies that he doesn't know, and explains that he is only her nephew. Irritated, the man says that she stole his money and wants to know how long she plans to hide. Hae-sung tries to close the door, but the man blocks it, shouting that he hasn't finished speaking. The loan shark then threatens him, saying that he must find his aunt by the 28th if he wants to live. Before leaving, he still warns them not to even think about calling the police about it. The deadline arrives, but he can't contact his aunt, who remains missing. The scene changes to the school, where a classmate asks to see his test after the exam. His friends surround him, worried, asking if something happened to him. One of them tries to cheer him up, saying that the girls postponed the meeting because of him. But with a desperate look, the protagonist asks them to go to the restaurant today. The group leaves the school, and one friend says that he already called a taxi for them to go. On the way, he sees the loan sharks from afar and realizes that they followed him to school. Terrified, he blends in with his friends, while one of them says that the taxi will arrive in 2 minutes. One of the thugs turns around and calls the boss, who looks at him with a disdainful expression. They spot the protagonist in the crowd, identifying him by his green backpack. The loan sharks corner him in a dark alley, asking if he thought he could hide, but they end up catching the wrong boy, who doesn't understand anything that's happening. With an intimidating look, the two men stare at the student, making the atmosphere heavy. Inside the taxi, the protagonist feels sick, and his friends ask if he's okay. He then covers his mouth tightly, trying his hardest not to vomit inside the car. Already at the restaurant, the friends wonder why the girls are taking so long to arrive. One friend notices his tension and asks him to say what's going on, but he only apologizes. The other friend insists, asking if everything is okay at home, but he only says yes. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes widen as he realizes he forgot something very important. In a rush, he turns to his friend and asks to borrow his phone for a moment. He runs to the bathroom to make a call, blaming himself for thinking only about himself. Desperate, he yells into the phone, asking where his sister Gyum-hae-bin is right now. She says that she's with her friends, and he forbids her from going home, telling her to sleep there. He shouts for her to just obey, while his sister asks why he's being so urgent. On the other end of the line, the boy hears her friend agreeing to host her, and he sighs in relief. Later, he drops her off at her friend's house, apologizing for the trouble and saying goodbye. The protagonist tells her to behave and promises to return the phone the next day. With his sister's phone in hand, he starts dialing the police number, making a decision. He thinks that he can't leave the house empty and plans to call as soon as they leave. Determined, he climbs the stairs, saying to himself that he needs to end this. Upon reaching his floor, the boy peeks and sees that there's no one in the hallway. Thinking he's safe, he walks to the door, planning to grab some things inside. But when he opens it, he comes face to face with the loan shark, who greets him with a sinister smile. The man stares at him angrily, asking if he thought he could simply run away. Trembling, the boy tries to call the police, but his hand can barely press the button. Before he can, the thug snatches the phone from his hand and ends the call. The loan sharks throw him inside the apartment, warning that he should prepare for the worst. The boss grabs him, saying that he will be punished for not finding his aunt in time. In a desperate act, he hits the thug and breaks free from the grip. The protagonist runs to the bathroom, but the loan sharks corner him and close the door. He has no way out, wondering what he can do to escape that situation. The men start banging on the door and the boy trembles with fear, not knowing what to do. They break the door down and throw him to the floor, saying that they only wanted to scare him a little. The thug says it would be a waste to use the tools on him since they were meant for the ant. Then, the loan shark gives him two options, to be beaten with the shower hose, or with the other tools. He stares coldly, making it clear that the second option would be far worse. Without thinking twice, the boy chooses to be beaten with the shower hose to avoid the worst. The boss agrees and prepares to hit the young man, but suddenly, the shower hose wraps around the thug's arm and pulls him into the bathtub. The boss yells at the idiot to get up, embarrassed by the scene he's making. The man screams that something is pulling him from inside the bathtub, but no one believes him. The water begins to stir and the protagonist's friend panics at the sight. The man calls out the employee's name, but soon after, he too is pulled inside. The protagonist gasps, looking back in disbelief at what just happened. Then, Yoon-hae appears in the bathtub, revealing that she was the one who saved him from the loan sharks. The scene shows her dragging the men's bodies into the depths of the ocean. With a cold look, the mermaid stares at him, her hair still wet from what she did. The scene returns to the doctor's office, and the doctor asks what happened after that. He then explains that the police arrived and handled the whole situation that took place. The boy stands up, saying that therapy is useless, and asks only for his medication. At the reception, he pays the fee and refuses the offer to schedule another medical appointment. But as he leaves, he walks down the stairs and collapses, crying with his hands on his head. In a flashback from that night, Yoon-hae hugs him while he cries in despair. The protagonist says that he killed two people, feeling guilty for what happened, but she corrects him, coldly stating that it wasn't him, it was her who did it. She explains that no one will ever know, because she hid the bodies, and no one believes in mermaids. Frightened, he steps back and asks how she can stay so calm after everything. Yoon-hae says that they tormented him, and that there's no problem getting rid of people like that. He questions her logic and asks if she would kill him too, if he ever tormented her. But she looks at him tenderly, saying that his existence is the reason for her happiness. The boy doesn't understand her reaction and wonders why Yoon-hae changed so much. She then says that he's the one who changed, and that his personality isn't the same anymore. He panics, feeling helpless and wanting to escape that situation. A week later, he leaves school with his friends, one of them complaining that the test was difficult. One of the boys tells the other that if someone hears him say that, they'll think he actually studied. Putting his arm around the protagonist's neck, his friend asks why he's been so distant. The protagonist only smiles, and his friends find it strange. Even surrounded by friends, he walks down the street feeling completely alone in the world. In his mind, he decides that he can no longer see Yoon-hae, because she's not the same person anymore. He explains that he's human and needs to adapt to his new life, and that he can't see her again. With a broken heart, he asks her to find another happiness for herself. The boy walks away, leaving her alone in the bathtub, with an expression of deep sadness. The scene ends with him saying goodbye to his friends and arriving at his house's door. When he enters, a voice greets him, and he sees his uncle with two strange men. The uncle tells him to go to his room, but the men call him over to talk a bit. He gets scared, but one of them says they're police officers and are only investigating. Sitting with them in the living room, the officer reveals the news that his aunt has died. The boy feels relieved, thinking they won't ask about the loan sharks who disappeared. One of the officers finds his lack of reaction strange and asks if he already knew the news. He panics, blaming himself for feeling relieved about someone's death. But his uncle defends him, saying that the woman was a parasite who spent all the money. The boy can't understand why the uncle, who never helped him, is defending him now. His aunt had been pursued by loan sharks because of her debts. In a flashback, the aunt receives a threatening call, telling her to stop calling. Because of that, the uncle cut contact with her for a few weeks until he got a phone call. On the call, he finds out that she was with another woman, and he explodes with rage. Consumed by hatred, the aunt promises to kill everyone, with a look of pure vengeance. That rainy night, the aunt takes a taxi, and the driver asks for her destination. She says she's going to Bucheon, and he warns that the fare will be very expensive at that hour. Looking through the rearview mirror, the taxi driver gets scared when he sees her holding a knife. He stops the car and throws her out, threatening to call the police if she doesn't leave immediately. Back in the car, he complains that he's all wet and thinks he's been seeing too many strange things. While driving, he wonders if he should have reported the woman to the police. Feeling sleepy, the driver decides to get a coffee to stay awake on the road. But when he turns around, he comes face to face with the aunt who appears in front of the car. She attacks him, and in desperation, he steps on the accelerator, screaming for her to get out. He loses control of the vehicle, which skids on the road and crashes hard into the barrier, causing the woman to fall into the sea. Then the police were at her house investigating why she had gone out with a knife. After talking, they thank them for the cooperation and say goodbye, leaving the uncle and nephew alone. As the protagonist closes the door, his uncle asks if everything was fine during his absence. That shocks him, unable to believe how cynical he's being. The boy feels disgusted by his uncle's careless face but knows he can't do anything, and besides that, he depends on his uncle or he'd be homeless. While studying, he feels as if his younger self is confronting him, asking if he's a murderer. The voice continues, questioning why he's studying peacefully after sending Yoonhae away, and deep down, he's terrified that the mermaid might have left a body behind. The boy thinks that he can simply leave, just like he did when he went to Seoul. Suddenly, his sister calls him, saying that Grandma Malsuk called his phone. He answers and greets his grandmother, trying to sound as calm as possible during the call. The boy says that he's been living well and that his sister Hee-bin has already become a grown girl. Pretending that the signal is bad, he asks her to wait as he's stepping outside to talk. He sits on the floor of the hallway, continuing the conversation with his grandmother outside. The protagonist stays silent for a moment, processing what he just heard. The scene cuts to him looking at old family photos from when they were still happy. In a flashback, little Hae-seong asks how his mom is feeling. The mother is cleaning his sister's ear and asks him to get another cotton swab. While searching, he starts thinking about what would happen if something went wrong. He wonders if a stepfather will show up, but the only image he has is of his father. When he turns around, he finds his sister sleeping on the floor and gets a little surprised. The boy wakes her up and asks where their mother went, but the little girl doesn't remember her, and she tells him that they don't have a mother. He questions why they don't have a mother, and the sister says that they should go look for her. The two walk along the pier until the boy spots their mother's boat in the distance. He points excitedly, saying that she went to get food for them in the sea. The little sister still doubts it, but he insists that they do have a mother. With tears in his eyes, he gets angry and tells his sister to go back home alone. He then runs along the pier, climbing onto a boat and shouting his mother's name, but when he arrives, he finds the boat completely empty and in absolute silence. Suddenly, he hears a voice calling him, and he fills with hope, thinking it's his mother. The boy climbs onto the boat, following the voice that keeps calling his name, but when he looks through the window, he finds no one and wonders where she is. The voice calls him again, and when he turns around, he sees seagulls. Terrified, his mother's body was floating in the water. In the present, he receives the news from his grandmother that his mother lost her life. While preparing to enter the funeral, he says that he was already ready for this situation. He looks at the photo of his mother, who had been in a coma since that incident and is now gone. With an incense stick in hand, he apologizes for not managing to be first in his class. He lies down on the floor and says that he had been preparing for this moment for years. The boy says goodbye, asking her not to be alone and to be happy by his father's side. With tears in his eyes, he remembers the happy moments he had with his family. Inside the house, he drinks in silence while the rain falls outside. The uncle asks Hae-seong's friends how they managed to get there. He mocks them, asking if they skipped class just to come to the funeral. The friends get irritated and say that they came because Hae-seong is their best friend. The uncle praises them, saying that they're better than the mother who abandoned her own children. The friends feel awkward and wonder if he's really the protagonist's uncle. Later, our hero accompanies his friends and asks what time the train arrives. The friend asks if his uncle always acts like that, and he says yes. Confused, the friend apologizes, but the other nudges him, not understanding the reason for the apology. In the elevator, the protagonist says goodbye, wishing them a safe trip back home. The friends look at each other, worried about Hae-seong's emotional state. One of them calls him and with a serious look, tries to give him one last piece of advice. He says that if his friend collapses now, his sister will have no one left to rely on. The words hit hard, and the protagonist bursts into tears in front of them. The friends hug him, telling him to cry as much as he wants and trying to comfort him. Back in the funeral room, he finds his sister sitting alone, staring at nothing. He sits beside her and hugs her, saying that she still has someone by her side. The little girl comments that his accent came back when he spoke to the people from their hometown. She remembers when they practiced the Seoul accent after they arrived in the city. He says that he'll only be sad until the end of the funeral, so their mother won't be sad. The protagonist promises that he will grow up to take on both the roles of father and mother. The sister says that she will always be by his side, as long as he doesn't do anything bad. He jokes and asks what would be an example of something bad, leaving the sister thoughtful. With an innocent look, she answers that maybe something like murder would be bad. She assures him that as long as he doesn't do that, they'll always be an inseparable duo. The scene returns to the school and the teacher begins class by talking about the test results. He complains that the class got the worst grades and tells them to study for their parents' sake. The teacher uses the protagonist as an example and asks if the others don't feel anything. The students start whispering, not understanding why the teacher mentioned Hae-seong. His friends are shocked by the teacher's audacity, and the protagonist packs up his things. One of his friends kicks a can, furious at the teacher for exposing Hae-seong's personal life. They suggest complaining or even asking for the teacher's resignation, but he says to let it go. The protagonist says goodbye, saying that he needs to go pick up his sister from her school. When he gets there, he finds his sister with two friends, who are enchanted by him. The sister introduces him as her oppa, and the friends compliment him, saying that he's very handsome. He asks why they left early, and the sister explains that it's because of the exams. The friends compare him to a famous actor, making the boy embarrassed by the compliment. But suddenly one of the friends reveals that his sister didn't go to Jeju Island, but to a funeral. The protagonist is shocked and wonders what Jeju Island has to do with all of this. The friend points to the boy, saying that he's trying to run away, and his sister trembles in fear. The boy who spread the gossip is caught, and the friend says that Hae-bin's oppa will handle him. The boy defends himself, saying that he only repeated what he heard from his mother about the funeral. Hae-seong apologizes on his sister's behalf, and the boy doesn't know how to respond. He pats the boy's head, saying that it's okay, and apologizing again. The protagonist confirms that they went to Jeju Island and asks him to tell that to his mother. The sister's friends are impressed by his attitude, thinking the scene is very cool. On the way home, the sister asks if he wasn't angry, but he says that it's okay. He takes her to the movies, saying that it's to make up for the Children's Day they missed. The sister gets excited about a kids movie and says she heard it's really famous. He asks if she wants to watch it, but the little girl says it's too childish for them. He looks at the movie times and she ends up choosing the kids movie anyway. The movie scene shows a birthday party, with the main character happy. The two watch the movie in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The character in the movie says that her parents love her very much and hugs them warmly. Beside him, he hears his sister sniffing and realizes that she's crying during the movie. The protagonist asks if she wants to leave, but the little girl just nods silently. Afterward, they go to a restaurant and he asks if the food tastes good to her. He feels guilty, thinking he shouldn't have suggested watching that movie. The boy asks if she still remembers the days they spent on Mole Island. He remembers how their father used to be happy with every little achievement of his daughter. The boy says that all her accomplishments were celebrated with big parties on the island. The sister says that she likes the life they have now, surprising her brother. She explains that before she used to feel lonely, but now she has many friends to play with. He remembers when he met Yoonhae and how she helped him overcome everything. The protagonist becomes thoughtful, remembering the happy moments he spent with the mermaid. As they leave the restaurant, he notices that it started to rain, but decides to walk anyway. The light turns green for them, but the boy says to wait since they're already late. But the sister insists that she can cross and runs ahead of him. He sighs, saying that he doesn't want to run but gets scared by something he sees on the street. A truck speeds forward and he screams his sister's name in despair, trying to warn her. The people around scream in panic, thinking that the girl was run over by the vehicle. A vision suddenly hits him, and he wonders if it was actually him who died, but a mysterious hand pulls her back, saving the little girl from a fatal accident. The girl apologizes, crying, and he hugs her, asking if she got hurt. She says that it was just a few scratches, and he hugs her tightly, relieved after the scare. Back home, she insists that someone pulled her, but he says that she must be mistaken. The girl swears that she felt someone's hand, and he jokes, saying that it was a ghost. She gets excited with the idea, but he interrupts her, telling her not to take it seriously. With a smile, he tells her to go to sleep, ending the conversation about the ghost. The sister says that if it was a ghost, she hopes it was their mom or dad. He agrees silently and sits at his desk to study while his sister sleeps. In the bathroom, he feels powerless, thinking that he will never be able to fill their parents' void. At school, the class is called for career counseling, and his friend returns from the room. He enters the teacher's office, who greets him and asks him to sit down. The teacher looks for his documents, and he waits, a bit anxious. He ends up seeing his friend's form, where it says that he wants to be a billionaire in the future. Then the protagonist sees his own form, where it says orphan, needs special attention. The teacher hands him the file and clears his throat before starting the counseling session. After class, a group of girls invites him to go to karaoke with them. His friends agree right away, saying that they also feel like going to karaoke. The two groups meet in the hallway, and the pink-haired girl seems surprised by something. She asks her friend to call Hae Song, and he accuses her of liking the protagonist. The girl gets furious and grabs the friend by the collar, telling him to stop with those ideas. The friend calls him, and the girl tries to act cute. He gets a bit confused since it's such a random invitation. The protagonist refuses, saying that he doesn't sing much. The girls insist, eventually convincing him to go. The friend jokes, telling the girl not to take too long choosing her outfit, and she says goodbye. The girls hug each other, celebrating that the plan worked and that their crush is going with them. The friends freak out, saying that Hae Song only looked at her during the whole conversation. The pink-haired girl melts, calling him a hopeless romantic. The group says goodbye and leaves the school, but the girl receives an unexpected call. She says it was her father, and that he offered to drive them to the karaoke place. The friend suggests that she should run after the car, but the girl refuses to do that. She jokes, asking if everyone shouldn't call their parents too to get a ride. The friend joins in on the joke, but suddenly covers his own mouth. The girl asks what's wrong with him, and the protagonist doesn't understand his reaction. The friend runs off, shouting that he wants to go to karaoke, acting strangely. The protagonist stays behind, and another friend asks him to wait for the group. The group walks to the karaoke place, and one of them comments that the place has good service. The friend approaches and calls the protagonist, seeming like he wants to say something important. He apologizes for the earlier joke, and Hae Seung doesn't understand the reason. The boy doesn't get why he's apologizing for talking about parents. He steps away, saying that he doesn't know what his friend is talking about, and keeps walking. The protagonist feels out of place, wondering why everyone else seems to have a normal life. The scene shows the karaoke sign, and his friend already starts singing enthusiastically. But his score is terrible, and the others make fun of his awful performance. The pink-haired friend whispers something to the other, and the two seem to have a plan. One of the girls interrupts the singing, saying that she has something important to tell. She complains that she fought with her mom and that now her curfew is 9 o'clock. The pink-haired girl takes the opportunity and starts talking with the protagonist. She asks why he's leaving early, and he explains that he has a younger sister at home. The girl asks if his parents work late, and the friend scolds her. He says it's a personal matter, and the girl gets irritated. The friend defends himself, saying that people shouldn't talk about family with the protagonist. The mood becomes tense, and another friend tries to lighten things up, calling the next person to sing. The pink-haired girl grabs the microphone, determined to lift the group's spirits. While she sings, the protagonist says that he's going to leave. Outside, the friend catches up to him, asking if he's okay with what happened, and if he got mad at him. In response, our hero asks why his friend always interferes whenever people talk about his family. The boy says he did that because Hei had just lost his mother, but Hei himself replies that he was treating him like an outcast. Confused, his friend asks what he means, and says that even his own family has problems. The protagonist says that he's not ashamed of his family and that he feels fine with them. And he also says that his friend isn't being any different from the teacher who exposed him in class. He shouts that he was only worried and that the protagonist is acting like a jerk. Later, the friend regrets it, feeling like an idiot for taking out his anger on him. Another friend comforts him, saying that only they understand Haesung's situation. He explains that he got angry for being compared to the class teacher. The friend decides that he'll apologize, but the other says that he crossed the line. He gets angry at himself, wondering why the hell he did that to his friend. Back home, the protagonist goes into the bathroom and sits pensively on the edge of the bathtub. Yoon-hae appears and says that they have much more in common than he imagines. He apologizes for acting like a coward and for being scared of her. The boy thanks her for saving his sister from the truck accident. He also thanks her for saving his own life, and the mermaid smiles kindly. She reveals that she doesn't have a father either, and that in fact she never had parents. The boy realizes that maybe he missed her because he felt different from everyone else. The mermaid says that she wants to be a friend he can trust during difficult times. He opens up saying that he's very tired of everything he's been going through. The protagonist feels like a stranger and doesn't know if he wants comfort or a normal life. He wonders if Yoon-hae also felt that way and seeks comfort in his friend. She comforts him, saying that his friend didn't say those things out of malice. The mermaid says that there's no reason for them to hate each other because no one truly understands them. She says that everyone will abandon him, always judging him for being different from others. He denies it, saying that his friends aren't like that, but she doubts his answer. The boy apologizes, and the mermaid asks why he's apologizing. He dodges the question, saying that it's nothing, and accepts that she might be right. The protagonist feels guilty and wonders if it's because he abandoned his friend. Then Yoon-hae says that she has something to show him, and touches the water in the bathtub. She asks him to look into the water and dive, leaving him curious. He obeys and submerges his head in the water, waiting to see what will happen. The boy opens his eyes and finds himself at the bottom of what seems to be a real ocean. Frightened, he emerges from the water, gasping and unable to believe what he just saw. He asks how the sea can be there, and she replies that it's the same as before. The mermaid reveals that it's the seawater from Malay Island, the place where they met. She invites him to come in and pulls him into the water with an inviting smile. He is carried by her and feels like it's the first time they swam together again. Yoon-hae holds him and says that their feelings for each other will never change. But suddenly her hand begins to fade, and he looks at her, confused by the sight. He shouts for her not to go, and suddenly he wakes up coughing in his home bathtub. The mermaid hugs him and he asks why she's doing that, completely confused. He remembers the death of the loan sharks and screams that he doesn't want to die like that. The boy says that he was scared and asks her to get out of the water, still in panic. But Yoon-hae reveals that she has always wanted to receive something from him, and asks if he will give it. Before he can answer, the mermaid kisses him, leaving him completely stunned. She looks at him and touches his face with an unreadable expression in her eyes. With a satisfied smile, she asks if it was good, and he feels strange. He pulls away and thinks that something isn't right, feeling that something is wrong. The boy goes to the kitchen and shivers, thinking that he kissed a mermaid. He wonders why she sees him as more than a friend. At that moment, he drops the kettle and decides not to fill the bathtub the next day. But when he turns around, he sees Yoon-hae on the floor. She appeared in the puddle of water. She says that they need to meet, and right after that she disappears again. The refrigerator starts beeping because it's open, but Hae is confused, wondering why she came again. He trembles, feeling that the situation is worse than before and that something is very wrong. The next day at school, his friend approaches him to finally talk. He complains that apologizing is very embarrassing, but that everyone insisted he do it. The friend apologizes for having crossed the line, and the protagonist accepts the apology. He remembers Yoon-hae's words and wonders why they keep coming to his mind. The protagonist thanks him, and the two finally make peace, leaving the friend confused. Suddenly, the rest of the group shows up, celebrating that the two made up. He calls the pink-haired girl Sol-bi to talk outside the classroom. The girl gets all excited and says yes, accepting the invitation immediately. He knows that this is wrong, but he can't let it affect his daily life. The boy thinks that, either way, he needs to protect himself above all else. He calls Sol-bi and says that he doesn't know how to say what he needs to say. The girl encourages him, telling him to say what he wants without fear, with a smile. He asks if she has any clothes she doesn't need anymore because his sister has grown up. The boy explains that he wanted to buy new clothes for her but doesn't have any money. He apologizes for asking suddenly, but the girl seems a little disappointed. The scene cuts to her room, where her friends ask why she would give him the clothes. They question why he wanted to talk in private and hint that he has a crush on her. The girl freaks out and says that's not even half of what actually happened. The next day, he shows up with a bunch of clothes, and she says that there's much more. But the girl says that she has one condition for giving him the clothes, leaving him surprised. She invites him to go to the beach with the group and says she'll only give the clothes if he goes. He thinks for a moment and ends up agreeing to the condition she set. The friends celebrate, saying that this is her chance to finally win him over. They already start talking about marriage, and the girl laughs, saying they're going too far. Back in the bathroom, Yoon-hae tries on one of the dresses and asks what he thinks. He says that it looks good on her and tries to seem as natural as possible in front of her. The boy thinks that he needs to please her so she won't act so controlling. The mermaid says that she prefers the old shirt because it was the first gift he gave her. He says that the shirt is too small and that this dress is also a gift from him to her. He wonders if she thinks the dress was a gift from someone else. The mermaid calls him to get in the water again and see the ocean once more, but he refuses, saying that it was too frightening last time and that he can't go in. Yoon-hae confronts him, saying that's not what he said before, leaving him confused. She reveals that she heard him telling the girl that he would go to the beach with her in the summer. The scene shows the pink-haired girl inviting him to go to the beach with the group. Shocked, he asks how she saw that, and wonders if she's been watching him at school. She explains that water is everywhere, and that she can see everything through it. The mermaid says that she needed the clothes and orders him to get into the water right now. He realizes that he has no choice but to obey, and that he can't go back anymore. Yoon-hae makes sure to show him the reality they are living in now. Suddenly the boy starts coughing, and the mermaid stares at him with an empty look. He wanted to say that it was she who killed them, but he knew it was a useless thought. Yoon-hae uses it against him, and he feels completely at the mermaid's mercy. At home, he yells at his sister, telling her not to fill the bathtub when he's there. The sister defends herself, saying it was for a science project, but he doesn't believe her. He shouts that if she had remembered what he said, she would have done it somewhere else. At school, a girl stops him, saying that he forgot his ID badge and will be punished for it. His friend gets startled and he wonders when he lost his school badge. He starts making a mental list, trying to understand what's happening to him. The protagonist thinks that he has to meet the mermaid every afternoon, and that she hates delays. He remembers that Yoon-hae can only leave the water if he's nearby, which complicates everything. Suddenly, he gets startled by a noise. A classmate drops her water bottle on the floor and apologizes for the scare. She asks if anyone has paper towels, but the classroom is out and no one has any. The protagonist gets an idea and grabs a tissue to help the girl clean up. She thanks him, and he tells her to hurry up and clean the mess quickly. The girl thinks his attitude is rude and wonders what's gotten into him. His friends throw a note onto his desk, asking if something's wrong with him. Then Hugh turns to them, and they stare at him, trying to understand why he's acting like that. The friend answers that no, but it's obvious that something's wrong with him. He thinks about who he could tell, but knows no one would believe his story. For days he thinks about how to get rid of Yoon-hae, but finds no solution. Finally, the day of the beach trip arrives, and the sea is already just ahead. He feels tense and concludes that this has become the most miserable day of his life. When they arrive at the inn, one of the girls complains about the smell and asks if there wasn't a better place. They decide to unpack their things and head straight to the beach to enjoy the day. But the protagonist says that he's not feeling well and will go later once he feels better. He watches his friends having fun at the beach while he stays alone in the room. He remembers Yoon-hae telling him to go when no one is around. The mermaid reminds him that he has no choice and that he must obey her orders. The boy fears that she will suddenly appear while he's with his friends. He goes to the kitchen and drinks some water, still deep in thought about what to do. The boy wonders if he really needs Yoon-hae in his life and makes a decision. He decides that he must find a way to make Yoon-hae disappear for good. The group returns from the beach and the girl complains that she spent a fortune on her outfit for nothing. They find the protagonist and say that they brought sashimi for everyone to eat together. He offers to set the table, and the pink-haired girl helps him with the food. The friend complains that it took them forever to find a restaurant since there was nothing nearby. The protagonist is surprised and asks how they managed to buy the sashimi. The friend says there's nothing to do in the area, and they start eating. The girl offers him a cup, but the protagonist politely refuses the drink. His friends get annoyed and tell him to stop acting that way with them. One of them says that they came from far away and that he's not taking part in anything. Tired of the argument, he sighs and says that it's fine, agreeing to join them. Night falls and the group has fun on the porch, laughing and talking cheerfully. Still disheartened, our hero tries to blend in, but the memory resurfaces. The boy remembers his aunt's death and her image haunts him again. Back to reality, his friend asks if they already know which school they'll attend. A friend says that Jae-jung is going to art school, and that the girls are too. The girls talk about their plans, and he says that he's thinking about a cooperative program. The girl jokes, saying that he still needs to study even in that program. He thinks that everyone has dreams and plans for the future, feeling a bit out of place. His friends insist that he should go to a better school since his grades are very good. Another friend covers his mouth, saying that Hee-sung's parents must be proud of him. The girl says that it's every parent's dream, and he just smiles, not knowing what to say. Tired of hiding it, he reveals to everyone that he has no parents, shocking the group. He explains that his parents passed away, and that's why he can't go to a better school. The protagonist decides to tell them everything that happened, and the friends listen in silence. He tells them about his father's death, the move to Seoul, and the recent death of his mother. Seeing their sadness, he asks why they look so sad and if he should stop. He also reveals about the old lady who used to help him and why he got rid of his phone. The boy wonders if he's drunk and why he's telling them all of that. He remembers Yoon-hae saying that he has no choice, and the fear returns to haunt him. Suddenly, he wakes up and wonders when he fell asleep in the room. Still in the middle of the night, he gets up, determined to put his plan into action. He knows he can't fight her and is afraid of what she would do if he exposed her. With a knife in his hand, he decides that he needs to end it all in the ocean. He goes to the beach and tells himself that everything will be fine in the end. The boy thinks that his life has been hard enough and that he deserves a bit of peace. But as he enters the water, he is surprised by his friend, who stops him from continuing. The friend confronts him, asking if he's serious about leaving so early. He accuses him of trying to kill himself, and the boy says that it's nothing like that. The knife falls into the water, and the friend asks how he can calm down in a situation like this. The protagonist yells for him to get out of the water, saying it's too dangerous there. Angrily, his friend says that he always chooses to suffer alone, but suddenly the mermaid appears. With a smile, she greets him and asks why he brought his friend along. The friend turns around and asks who the girl is, leaving the protagonist in panic. He wonders why she came out and fears that something terrible will happen to his friend. Frightened, the friend ends up falling. He is shocked when he sees the mermaid's tail, and the protagonist yells for him to get out of the water. The mermaid confronts him, but he says that he's Hae-sung's real friend. Tired of the argument, the protagonist shouts for them to stop fighting right now. He holds her and asks why she's doing that, feeling betrayed by her. The boy says that if she were truly his friend, she wouldn't put him in danger. He reveals that she and his friends are equally precious to him, without distinction. Yoon-hae touches his face and says that she doesn't like being treated like the others. The mermaid says that she wants him to realize that she's special and to treat her differently. He says that he'll try, but the mermaid responds that she doesn't believe his words. She accuses him of not wanting to try and says that's why he brought a knife with him. Suddenly, she shows the knife in her hand, leaving the boy in shock. Then she asks if he's afraid of her now too. He stammers, saying that he brought the knife to protect himself and that he would never hurt her. The mermaid says that it seems like he's protecting his friend, not the other way around, and that he only protected her back when they still lived on the island. The mermaid says that she doesn't like the situation or having his friend nearby. He throws himself into the water and begs her not to do anything, saying that it was a mistake. The boy pleads on his knees, begging her to please let his friend go. Yoon-hae says that he doesn't need his friend and that he's always been alone, even surrounded by people. She invites him to return to Mole Island and relive the happy times they once had. He accepts the offer and says that they can go, but the girl wants to talk about it after the friend leaves. The protagonist helps his friend get up and leads him out of the water. He tells his friend not to say anything and just go, and the mermaid watches everything from afar. The boy begs her to find happiness somewhere else, but she doesn't believe him. She accuses him of lying again, and he turns around, calling her name. Suddenly, his friend screams and says that something is pulling him down into the water. The protagonist tries to help him, but the friend shouts that something is pulling him hard. He tries to pull his friend up, but realizes that the mermaid won't let him go no matter what. Desperate, he screams for her to let go, saying that his friend has nothing to do with them. He realizes that he can't lose his friend and grabs a rock from the water. With all his strength, he hits the hand that's holding his friend, trying to free him. From under the water, she looks at him with that insane gaze, and decides to squeeze the boy's hand even harder. He screams in pain, and the two are finally released from the mermaid's grip. His friend sinks into the water, and the protagonist screams his name in despair. With tears in his eyes, he stares at the mermaid, feeling betrayed and powerless. She reveals that she sent his friend to the bottom of the ocean, but that he's not dead yet. The mermaid says that she will bring him back if he says what she wants to hear from him. He stammers, saying that he'll go to the island with her, but that's not what she wants. The boy tries to apologize for hurting her, but she interrupts him again. He says that she's the most important person to him, but she denies it once more. The mermaid tells him to try again and drowns him until he says the right answer. She hugs him and tells him to keep trying until he says what she wants to hear. The scene shifts to the police station, and the protagonist's uncle leaves him alone to be interrogated. The detective calls him and takes him to a room to be questioned about the case. The detective reminds him that it's illegal for a minor to stay at a lodging without a guardian. He starts telling what happened, saying that he woke up early to go to the beach. But as he relives the scene, he has a panic attack and begins to feel suffocated. The image of his friend drowning comes to his mind, and he panics in the room. He knocks over the table and the detective gets startled, asking what's wrong with him. The boy says that he can't remember and that he can't continue with the testimony. The scene changes and the mother of one of his friends complains that this will ruin her son's college entrance exams. She tries to blame Hae-sung, saying that he hangs out with bad influences and has no parents. The mother hits her son and blames him for going to the beach without her permission. The detective tries to calm her down, saying that whatever she says won't affect the investigation. He asks the friend what the relationship between Hae-sung and the missing boy was like. The friend says that on the night of the incident, the missing boy became very sentimental. He assures that his friend would never hurt anyone, and that he's sure of it. The detective asks if he ever crossed the line when talking about Hae-sung's family. The officer asks if they were drinking, and the boy is shocked by the question. With no evidence, the detectives conclude that it was an accidental drowning caused by alcohol. A week later, he receives a visit from his friend and asks how he found his address. The friend reveals that the missing boy's parents have given up the search and are holding the funeral. He asks if he can go, and the friend encourages him, saying that he should. The friend shakes him, saying that if he keeps running away, no one will believe in his innocence. He agrees to meet him the next day, and the friend cries, relieved by his decision. At the funeral, he finds his friend, who calls him inside to pay his respects. The boy bows in respect, and the deceased family watches him in silence. He approaches the parents, and the friend introduces him, saying that Hae-sung is there. The protagonist bows in respect, and the boy's mother stares at him with sadness. The boy's father greets him and asks him to say goodbye to his son one last time. He kneels before the altar, and the father tells the woman not to say anything to the boy. In silence, he lights an incense stick and sits to pay his last respects. He remembers the scene of his friend drowning and feels that he's the one to blame. He wishes he were insane and that it was all just in his head. In a flashback, the students get ready to take the class graduation photo. His friend asks the protagonist what he thinks of his look, but he doesn't even look. He laughs, saying that he feels strange with the top button of his shirt closed. The photographer asks him to turn slightly and takes the picture at the perfect moment, and it was exactly that photo taken that day that was displayed at his funeral. Hai just wanted to die, feeling guilty for what had happened. He bows in respect, and the boy's mother approaches with a hesitant expression. She asks desperately if he didn't hurt her son and if it was really just an accident. The father tries to restrain her, but the woman clings to the protagonist, begging for the truth. She recalls how the two were close, and how he used to have dinner at their house. The father reprimands her and apologizes to the guests for the scene she's making. The deceased sister calls the protagonist and his friend to talk outside. She takes them to a more private room and begins speaking to both of them. The girl says that the family isn't doing well and that everything happened so suddenly. With tears in her eyes, she says that she still can't believe what happened to her brother. She hugs him hesitantly and tries to get closer to offer some comfort. The girl says that she's sure it was an accident because he was her brother's best friend. That's why they will ask the police to stop the investigation and that she believes in him. She remembers how they always supported each other, but the girl asks our hero never to come back there again. He should stay for a while and then leave quietly without anyone seeing him. She says goodbye, saying that she hopes never to see him again and that it would be better for her. His other friend approaches and asks if Hai is okay, but the protagonist interrupts and asks if it's starting to rain. With that, he turns and says that he's already leaving. He knows that with water nearby, he must leave as quickly as possible. He runs out into the rain, leaving his friend behind, confused by his reaction. He remembers Yoon Hai and how she threatened him, saying that she wouldn't see him for a while. The mermaid tells him to call her again when he figures out what he did wrong to her. Alone in the rain, he lifts his head and looks at the sky, feeling completely lost. He realizes that he can't escape her, no matter where he goes in the world. The boy blames himself for his friend's death and fears that the mermaid will kill someone else. When he gets home, his sister sees him soaking wet and asks if he's okay. He tells the girl to leave the house for 3 hours, leaving her confused by the request. The girl obeys, and he goes to the bathroom, filling the bathtub to call her. He calls for Yoon Hae and reaches out his hand to her with a determined look. The mermaid appears and he pulls her close, holding her hand tightly. The protagonist kisses her and looks at her with a smile on his lips, surprising the mermaid. He says that he missed her and realized that she is all he has. The boy asks her to take him back to the island, and she pulls him into the water. He thinks that he doesn't deserve to live, and apologizes to everyone he left behind. The protagonist says that he needs to do this to protect his friends and his family. He and Yoon Hae are in the island cave, and he decides that he must do it. The boy comments that the place hasn't changed at all, and that it's still peaceful and beautiful. He says that he should have come earlier, so they could talk more openly. The boy thanks her for bringing him back to his happy childhood. He hugs her and asks her to take him back home so he can pack his things. Back at the apartment, his sister arrives and calls for him, worried about his disappearance. The girl finds a letter and reads it, discovering that he will be gone for a month. She gets confused by the letter and wonders what happened to her brother. On the island, he says that he always wanted to see her house, and she seems surprised. The mermaid says that she doesn't remember much about her family and only remembers having fun with him, but he knows that it's a lie and remembers the abuse he suffered in his childhood. The protagonist thinks that the longing he feels makes him remember every detail of his family. He wonders what would happen if he lured her outside and drained the water. The boy thinks that the beach is only 3 minutes away and that it wouldn't be hard to get rid of her, but he knows that she would kill him first and that he can't defeat her by force. A month passes and he remains on the island, living a quiet life with the mermaid. He spends his days swimming and talking with her, far from all his problems. He wished he could let the water fill his lungs, but she wouldn't let him. He wanted to drown, but Yoon Hae would never allow him to die. At night, they went back home and she stayed with him until he fell asleep. After a month, he started to feel happy by her side again, but she seemed resentful, and he said that she would never understand what he went through. He felt sorry for her and imagined young Yoon Hae waiting for him all alone. The boy hugs her and apologizes for leaving her alone for so long. She says that she was sad that he changed and that his friends hurt him. The mermaid says that she hated seeing him suffer because he meant the world to her. He wonders if she would have stayed the same if he hadn't left. The protagonist realizes that he ruined everything with his greed and selfishness, and hugs her. Without her, he would have never realized what was wrong with himself. Despite his hopeless situation, he feels calm beside her. She notices that he's sick and asks if he feels dizzy. The mermaid asks if he didn't bring enough food and if he's starving. He explains that he can't stand food anymore since he spends most of the day in the water. Yoon Hae says that they should go back to Seoul, leaving the protagonist surprised by her decision. She reminds him that his vacation is almost over and that he needs to return to school. He asks if he can go back and is surprised that she doesn't hate him for being in Seoul. The mermaid says that she would hate it more if he got sick and takes him out of the water. She hugs him and thanks him for everything he's done for her lately. The boy is surprised by her kindness and wonders if he's felt this before. Back home, he finds his sister who hugs him, worried about his disappearance. She asks where he's been, and the boy tells her not to wake him up because he wants to sleep. The sister cries and he sleeps for days as if dead, finally at peace. 2 days before the end of vacation, he talks with the mermaid in the bathroom. She says that she wants to see the outside world and he agrees, a bit uneasy. The boy says that they've spent too much time in Seoul and that he wants to try something different. The two go out in the rain and he asks if she wants the umbrella, but she refuses. He thinks that school starts the day after tomorrow but that he's no longer interested in going. He asks if he should drop out of school to live with her on the island, leaving her surprised. The mermaid asks why and he says that it's what she wanted, for them to live alone forever. She says that it's a great idea but that he shouldn't decide now, only discuss it. Suddenly the pink-haired girl appears and calls for him, interrupting the conversation. She asks what he's doing there in the rain, leaving him uneasy. He diverts the subject, saying that he dropped something and that he's already leaving that place. The girl says that everyone has been wondering how he's doing and that she was going to visit him at school. She gets closer and says that everyone is worried, but he says that he needs to go. The girl stops him and reveals that she's been going to therapy and that it's been helping a lot. She says that the therapist told her it's better to share sadness with those who went through the same thing. The girl says that they've been meeting to comfort one another and he stops. She invites him to join them but the image of the mermaid appears beside her. He gets irritated and asks if she really thinks they went through the same thing. The boy laughs and says that she's so stupid she doesn't even know when to shut up. With a sinister smile he stares at her and the girl can't understand his reaction. He confronts her saying that she was asleep when everything happened and doesn't know anything. The boy says that he was studying but that she used the clothes as an excuse to take him to the beach. He accuses her of ruining his vacation and bragging about having a therapist for him. The girl apologizes and he stares at her, waiting for an answer to his question. With tears in her eyes, she admits that she crossed the line and apologizes again. She turns around and leaves, while the protagonist keeps watching her. The mermaid appears in a puddle of water and says that the girl must be very hurt. She says she's happy to see how much he cares about her and that she can wait. Yoon-hae tells him to keep going to school and that she can wait for him. She reminds him that school starts tomorrow and asks if he's excited to go back. Suddenly the doorbell rings and he gets startled, not knowing who it could be. He wonders if it's his uncle since his sister isn't home at that moment. The boy tells the mermaid to wait and goes to the door, feeling a bit anxious. When he opens it, he comes face to face with his friend, who says that they need to talk. He asks how the friend figured out the password, but the friend says they should just talk. He sighs and says that the friend needs to leave because he doesn't want to talk anymore. The friend says that it's not too late to apologize and that everything can go back to normal. He says he can't just let him stay there suffering alone. The protagonist says that the friend means nothing to him, leaving him speechless. The friend is shocked, and the protagonist throws him out, telling him to leave him alone. He walks away and asks if Hae-sung really meant what he said, but he doesn't answer. Before leaving, he turns around and says that he has something important to tell him. He reveals that he didn't tell the police about their fight because he trusted him, but now he regrets it and wonders what really happened that day. With a mocking smile, the protagonist asks why he didn't tell the truth. The friend gets angry and leaves while the protagonist stumbles backward. He enters the bathroom and asks if the mermaid heard everything, and she says that he's cruel. The friend walks down the stairs, still shocked by the protagonist's behavior during their argument. He wonders if something happened between them but tries to push the thought away. Suddenly he finds Hae-sung's sister sitting on the stairs. The girl asks if he talked to her brother, and he looks at her with sadness. He apologizes and says that there's nothing he can do to help now. The sister asks if that's really true, and if he can't help her brother at all. The friend asks if she has a phone and saves his number so she can call if she needs anything. He leaves, and the girl looks at her phone, worried about her brother and her friend. School starts again, and the protagonist walks into the classroom feeling out of place. Everyone stares at him because they know what happened at the beach. The boy sits at his desk, and his friend approaches, placing a hand on his shoulder. He invites him to have lunch and says that he'll pay, trying to reconnect, but the protagonist slaps his hand away and leaves the room without saying a word. He finds the girls in the hallway and walks past them without even greeting them. The friend tells Solby not to talk to him anymore and says she can't believe he ignored her. The teacher walks into the classroom and tells everyone to sit down to begin roll call. He gets confused and calls the name of the deceased friend, making the atmosphere heavy. After that day, everyone at school completely stopped talking to the protagonist. 2 weeks later, he asks his sister to leave the house for a while again. She refuses and asks why she has to leave every time he wants to be alone. The girl says that he's been acting strange since the funeral and that she's scared of him. He pushes her out of the house, ignoring her protests and crying. The boy says that nothing is wrong and tells her to come back in 4 hours. Outside, she tries to convince herself that she needs to give him some space. She decides to stop crying and thinks that he must be exhausted from taking care of her. The girl goes to a cafe and the employees complain that she only uses the bathroom. One of them confronts her and asks why she's using the restroom without buying anything. The employee says that only paying customers can use the store's restroom. The customers recognize the girl and wonder why she's in trouble there. The employee asks if she doesn't have a home, and the other customers mock her. Suddenly, a voice calls her and she turns around, surprised by who she sees. The pink-haired girl and her brother's friend invite her to sit with them. Solbai confronts the employee and invites her for a private talk downstairs. They take her to the table and explain that they were talking about how to help Hae-sung. The little girl starts crying, and they comfort her, saying that everything will be okay. One of the friends asks what made Hae-sung act so strange all of a sudden. The sister says that he used to be nice but became mean, and doesn't let her use the bathroom. The friend realizes that he's not just picking on Solbai, and that his personality has changed. She says that she thinks it's because of the bathtub and that he isn't sick. The girl says that he forbids her from emptying the tub and leaves notes with warnings. They get scared and wonder if he has some kind of mental issue or obsession. The sister is shocked and asks what accident they're talking about, not knowing anything. One of the girls jokes that he might have joined a cult, scaring the younger girl. She says that she wants to find out the truth and that she's relieved they haven't given up. The friend says that they've thought about it a lot and that there must be a reason for his change. He promises that they'll do their best and that the problem is whether he wants to come back. Solbai returns and brings a bunch of sweets for the protagonist's sister to eat. She explains that the employee sent the sweets as an apology to her. The friend jokes, asking for one, but Solbai says they're all for Hyben. The little girl eats happily, and everyone watches her with a smile on their faces. The friend thinks that Hyben Ses has a sister who cares about him and wonders why he acts that way. He suggests a dangerous plan, and everyone at the table agrees to try it. At school, the girls greet him and he's surprised by their attitude. The friend also greets him, and he wonders why everyone is talking to him. The teacher announces that summer is over and that some students are getting too relaxed. He calls him to the teacher's office, and the protagonist agrees, not understanding why. In the office, the teacher asks what's going on and says that he's not usually like this. He accuses him of not focusing and asks if it's because of the accident. The boy bows and apologizes, saying that it won't happen again. But the teacher yells, ordering him to come back, saying that he's not finished talking. He insults him, saying that he has no manners because he has no parents to teach him. Angry, Freya turns back and asks the teacher to repeat what he just said, leaving him scared. He says that the boy needs to try harder instead of showing his flaws. The teacher says that he also lost his father but never showed his weakness. The protagonist wonders why the teacher is so angry with him today. The man says that he needs to forget his friend's death and move on with his life. He remembers hearing something similar before but didn't feel angry at the time. The boy thinks that maybe it was because he had friends by his side, but that wasn't it. He remembers Yoon Hai and how she said that no one could understand them. With a smile, he realizes that the mermaid was right and that no one understands him. The teacher says that he's basically his guardian and that he can't talk back like that. The protagonist asks why he compares them when their lives are completely different. He accuses him of wanting to feel good by scolding a student who's struggling. The teacher trembles with anger and the protagonist says that he wishes he'd lost his father at 32. Furious, the teacher hits him with a folder, striking him right on the head. The man accuses him of being rude and goes after him, forcing another teacher to intervene. He says that he was just trying to help, but the protagonist says that's just his opinion. The teacher threatens him with his school record, but the boy doesn't care anymore. The teacher yells at him to drop out of school and threatens him, but he leaves without looking back. Back in the bathroom, he says that he went through something similar, and the mermaid comforts him. She says that she just wanted to live in peace but that others made her feel miserable. The protagonist agrees and says that he felt exactly like that on that day at school. She hugs him and he feels much better, finding comfort in her arms. He wonders why she can't stay with him forever, and the mermaid apologizes. The boy gets confused and asks what she's apologizing for now. She says that she can't comfort him and hates herself for not having that power, and she even says that maybe the best thing would be to disappear from his life for good. The protagonist asks why now, when he finally chose her and got used to her. He gets desperate and begs her not to say that, because she's the only one who understands him. Meanwhile, a cell phone in the bathroom is recording everything. In physical education class, the teacher tells everyone to find a partner to practice with. The friend calls him, but another says that he'll partner with Hai Song. He says that the protagonist isn't participating anymore, but that he should pair up with Jong Hwan. The friend asks him to be his partner, but he turns away, ignoring the invitation. He leaves the court, and the friend follows, asking where he's going. The protagonist says that he understands why they're trying to talk to him, but he says that he can't take it anymore and doesn't want their help anymore. The friend says that he was only looking for a partner and that he has other friends. He wonders if the change in attitude is because of Yoon Hwan, and the friend gets startled. Hai's sister had recorded everything and took it to the friends so they could hear what happened in the bathroom. The group wonders if they should tell his sister about what they heard in the recording, since she's still too young to understand. Solbi asks who Yoon Hwan is and if there's anyone by that name at school. They find it strange that the conversation happened in the bathroom and wonder if they were smoking. The pink-haired girl wonders why he distances himself if he seems fine with Yoon Hwan. A friend suggests that they're dating and that she's the one controlling the relationship. The friend comments that her way of speaking is strange and that she changes her tone of voice. He says that she talks as if she isn't even human. The friend scolds him, and he grows thoughtful, trying to understand what's happening. Back to the present, the protagonist trembles and asks how the friend knows about Yoon Hwan. Furious, he grabs him by the collar and yells, demanding to know how he found out. The friend says that he can't breathe and he thinks that he was sacrificing himself. He thought he was protecting everyone from something terrifying, but he was wrong. The boy realizes that now he fears his friends more than the mermaid herself. He lets go of the friend, who coughs, and the protagonist looks around, worried. The boy fears that Yoon Hwan heard the conversation and doesn't know what to do. He runs away, leaving his friend behind, who calls after him, confused. In the classroom, the teacher asks who's missing, and everyone notices his absence. The friend says they haven't seen him since gym class, and the teacher gets irritated. At the end of the day, they discover that Hoin Sung never returned to school and start to worry. The girl says it was a mistake to bring up Yoon Hwan, and that the timing was terrible. The friend decides to take Hoin Sung's things to his house and talk to him later. On the way, he calls the boy's sister and asks if Hwan-sung is home. He asks if Hwan has seen her brother, and she answers, making him even more worried. On the other end of the line, the protagonist tells him never to call Hwan-haben again. He says that he heard everything, and knows that they used his sister to record him. The boy hangs up on the friend and blocks his number so he won't receive calls anymore. He confiscates his sister's phone and tells her not to call his friends again. The scene shifts, and the friend is in art class but can't focus. He gets a call from Hae-seong's sister, but it's actually him on the line. They meet at the park so he can return the backpack that was left at school. He hands over the backpack and uniform, and the protagonist says that he came to answer one last time. His friend asks if he abandoned them because Yoon-hae is obsessed with him, but in response he says no, that he's the one obsessed with her. The friend apologizes for recording the conversation but says that she's not good for him. He says that Yoon-hae is a childhood friend and that he's known her since he was 10. The boy says that he's the only one she has and that they mean nothing to him. The friend asks if he remembers what Soonbin said before the accident. He reminds him that the friend asked him not to suffer alone and to talk with them. The friend says that many people care about him and that he doesn't need her, but the protagonist replies that she's the one who helped him when he was in trouble. He says that all of that is in the past and that it doesn't matter anymore. With a sinister smile, he says that the friend isn't here anymore and that there's no point in talking about him. The friend gets angry and punches him in the face, making him fall to the ground. Back in the bathroom, he says that someone knows about her but that he never told anyone. The mermaid says that she knows and that she heard everything that happened in their conversation. He realizes that she was watching and feels even more trapped in the situation. The boy says that she must be upset and that his friend is weird and scary. She questions him and asks why he ran away if he already knew his friend would be a problem. He apologizes and says that he was so scared he wasn't thinking straight. The mermaid asks if he doesn't care if the friend disappears and he stares at her. She reminds him that she said anyone who bothers him needs to disappear. The protagonist gets scared and asks if she's saying that she's going to kill the friend. The mermaid asks what he thinks and what he would do to make him disappear. In shock, he asks if she means that she's going to kill him. Smiling, she says that it's actually a good idea and asks his opinion on what they could do. Back to the moment of the fight, Hai's friend asks how he could say those things. Still throwing punches, he says he can't believe he ever had someone like him as a friend. He reminds him how Soonbin cared about him and how he was a good friend. In a flashback, the friend says that he still wants to be there for him if he ever needs it. He says the problem is that Hae-seong keeps suffering alone, and that makes him nervous. The friend asks him to lean on him, or at least on the other friends who are there. He agrees and thanks him for the support, feeling a bit better after the conversation. After cleaning everything up, one of the girls says she cried so much that she needs to hug her mom. The friend is surprised that he told them everything and wonders how he became so amazing. He says that Hae-seong isn't okay and that their personalities are complete opposites. The friend asks the others to be there for him if something ever happens in the future. He says he didn't want to think that way and feels guilty for ever doubting him. The protagonist wishes it had been him who died instead of the friend who's gone. The people around separate the fight, and the friend stares at him with anger and disgust. He says he's going to ignore him and threatens him, telling him not to talk to any of them again. The protagonist is left alone, and the people nearby ask if he's okay. He doesn't remember much, but he thinks the mermaid got furious about his injuries. The boy was completely alone until graduation, with no friends to talk to. The teacher jokes, saying that the students must be happy to never see him again. He tells the students to leave because he needs to lock the classroom door. The protagonist finds a rose on his desk and is surprised by the gift. The teacher says that's enough and that their parents must be waiting outside. He turns to leave, and the teacher starts the countdown for the photo. The boy walks out of the classroom and leaves the flower behind, not caring about the gift. He hears the voice of his friend calling him to play soccer, just like old times. The protagonist walks down the empty hallway, ignoring the call of the friend who's gone. He moves forward alone, carrying the weight of his choices and his losses. He takes a train and a boat, returning to his hometown, Mole Island. He feels a bit embarrassed, but happy to be back in the place he loves. The mermaid appears in the water and waves at him with a gentle smile. He waves back and the two reunite on the island, just like the old days. In the cave, she says that she has something to show him. She asks him to close his eyes, and he asks what it is, curious about the surprise. After a moment, she tells him to open his eyes, and he sees the yellow submarine. The young man remembers that toy he left behind when he left the island. He moves toward the toy to hold it, but the mermaid doesn't let him. She hugs him and says that it's her #1 treasure and that now it belongs to her. He smiles and agrees, saying that the toy is hers forever as a gift. The mermaid says that the submarine doesn't move anymore and that maybe it's broken. He teaches her how to wind it up and the toy starts moving in the water again. The boy is happy and laughs, feeling peaceful and content by her side. But suddenly he notices something strange on her tail and asks what happened, leaving her surprised. The mermaid shows a wound on her tail and says she scratched herself on a rock. He worries and suggests applying some ointment, but she says she's fine. With a smile, she says that his concern already makes her feel much better. He gets embarrassed and agrees, not knowing what to say to her at that moment. Night falls and he asks if they should go home since it's getting late. At her house, the mermaid asks if he is sick and watches him closely. The boy shivers with cold and says that the floor is as cold as ice at night. She asks what he used to do when he felt cold and he says he doesn't quite remember. but he recalls that his mother used to hug him under the blankets. With a loving look, she hugs him and says she will keep him warm. He hugs her back and feels a shiver because of the water dripping from her. The boy says he feels even colder because he's wet, and she stares at him. She says he's tired and should rest a bit to feel better. Suddenly they hear a noise and wonder if someone is inside the house. The door opens and an old lady appears asking if it's Hai Seong there. He calls her grandmother and she stares at him, surprised by the unexpected visit. The woman asks what he's doing there in the middle of winter and takes him inside. She says the power was cut off and that he could have frozen to death. The lady introduces herself as Grandma Malsuk Park and takes care of him lovingly. She never married or had children and cared for his mother as if she were her own. The grandmother also paid their expenses when the boy's mother fell ill. In a flashback lying across some chairs, he hears the old woman saying there's nothing to do. She was talking to his uncle and he said he couldn't take care of 2 children. The grandmother confronts him, saying it was her sister's dream to have her children living in Seoul. She explains that she can't take care of them because she knows nothing except diving. The grandmother listens and says she's not asking him to support his nephews. She reveals that he and the children will inherit everything she has, leaving him shocked. The lady begs him to take care of the nephews and the boy hears everything while hiding. He looks at his uncle and realizes his life is about to change forever. Back in the present, the grandmother apologizes for not attending the graduation and asks if the uncle went. He asks if she's healthy and the grandmother looks at him with a loving gaze. She says she'll last 10 more years and will save money for his college. He asks her not to say that and says he doesn't know what he'll do if she's gone. The grandmother smiles and holds his hand, trying to comfort him with a tender touch. She says she knows it's hard and looks at him with an understanding expression. The lady apologizes for sending them to Seoul and says she knows it was difficult. She says he can blame her, but he must not give up on himself. The boy is moved by her words and feels a little better with her support. The grandmother says she's proud of him for getting the 2nd best grade in the class. She praises his intelligence and says he's a polite young man with many friends. The protagonist remembers his friends and how they comforted him at the funeral. The grandmother says he's the best boy she knows and that she's sure of a bright future. She invites him to sleep there and says she'll call the driver to take him back. He goes out at night and walks to the beach where he finds the mermaid waiting for him. He tries to say something, but the mermaid interrupts him with a serious expression. She asks how he would feel if she died, leaving the boy in shock. He asks why she would say something like that, and the mermaid looks at him sadly. The boy says he doesn't want to hear it and that he doesn't know what he'd do if she died. She reveals that she would die with him and couldn't live in a world without him. The next day he meets a friend of his father who praises him, saying he looks like him. He feels embarrassed and wonders why the mermaid said that the night before. He remembers his grandmother and how she promised to save money for his college. The boy trembles and feels even more pressured by everyone's expectations. He realizes that his grandmother's house is far from the sea and that it didn't rain the night before. The boy wonders where she heard the conversation and if she can always hear him. He is startled to see the mermaid hiding and realizes there isn't enough water there. He wonders how she got there since she can't walk and feels confused. The protagonist questions why he's worried and admits that he likes her. He decides he should spend more time with her and accept his feelings. He realizes that he is the problem and calls out for Yoon Hae, determined to fix it. In a flashback, he smiles at the mermaid and asks if she brought what he asked for. He shows the shell he found and she shows an even bigger one, winning the contest. The boy complains that she won again and wonders where she finds such big shells. He is impressed by the size and asks if he can keep the shell for himself. Suddenly he hears his mother calling him and slips, almost falling into the water. He runs to his mother and hugs her, happy to see her back from work. She reminds him to come home before dark because his grandmother will make dinner. The boy hides and the mermaid stares at him, curious about the appearance of his mother. He asks if she saw her, and the mermaid confirms with a slightly sad look. The protagonist asks if she has always lived on the island, and she says she doesn't know. He asks where she was born, and the mermaid stays silent, not knowing what to answer. She asks what it means to be born, and he explains about his family on the island. The mermaid says she used to be a little jealous of his parents and gets hurt. She says that now she has a friend just for her and doesn't feel lonely anymore. He asks if he can stay with her forever, and she agrees, happy with the idea. The boy says that when they grow up, he will have a submarine on the island or a naval base. He promises that he will become a captain and save her if anything happens, making her excited. The mermaid looks at him with a smile and he feels happy to have a friend like her. She agrees, and he lets the shell fall into the water as a symbol of their friendship. At school, it rains outside and his classmates plan to test the protagonist. They bet that whoever makes him talk will win 5,000 won as a prize. The friends approach and call him, trying to start a conversation with the boy. One of them says he has something very important to tell and that he needs to listen. A classmate pokes him and he gets startled, falling from his chair in fright. The whole class laughs at the scene and he gets up, embarrassed by the situation. He complains that his notes are all smudged and asks what they did to him. A boy comes closer and asks if they scared him, but he slaps his hand away. The classmate defends himself, saying he just wanted to help and that he didn't need to hit him. Suddenly, the class representative intervenes, trying to defend him. She says that this is considered bullying and that they should stop fooling around. Annoyed, the boy asks why she is being so serious about the situation. He accuses her of thinking she's better for being the class president, and she ignores him. The young girl asks the protagonist if he is okay, but something shocks him. The mermaid was at the window watching everything, so he asks the representative not to touch him, leaving the girl confused. The class laughs while he leaves the room angrily. The representative says that's why one shouldn't help anyone and walks away. In the bathroom, he hugs the mermaid and feels calm and safe in her arms. He tells her that he got scared by her appearance at the window and asks if she missed him. With a serious look, the mermaid asks if those boys were bullying him. This makes the protagonist afraid that she might do something. She hugs him and says it seems like he doesn't know how to defend himself. The mermaid asks if he's afraid she'll do something to his classmates. In the teacher's room, the representative delivers the school trip forms. She says that only one student didn't turn it in, Hae-sang, making the teacher worried. The girl says she has something to tell about the protagonist, and the teacher listens. She thinks for a moment and decides that she needs to talk to Hae-sang first. The teacher asks the representative to keep an eye on him, and she agrees to help. Back in the bathroom, he leans on the sink and the mermaid comforts him with a touch. He apologizes for making her feel that way, and she stares at him. The boy admits that they are bullying him, and that he just didn't want to worry her. The mermaid hugs him and says she came to see him because she couldn't stand the situation anymore. She says that she's on his side and won't stand still if they torment him again. He thanks the mermaid and says goodbye, saying he'll see her later. The boy thinks he did his best and that he doesn't care if the others die. He feels safe with her by his side and smiles, feeling more confident. The representative stares at him in the hallway, and he greets her with a smile. She finds it strange and thinks he seemed upset before but is now happy. The protagonist regrets smiling and feels like an idiot for doing it. He notices that his uncle has started spending more time at home, which is strange. The man calls the two out of the room and the protagonist feels uneasy. He tells his sister to stay quiet and goes out to see what his uncle wants with them. The uncle asks about Haibin and the protagonist says she's sleeping. He tells the boy to wake her up, but the protagonist offers to speak instead of her. The uncle puts out his cigarette and calls him an annoying bastard, making the atmosphere heavy. He reveals that he lost the business and can barely pay the rent and bills. The man forbids him from telling the grandmother and says her money will be used to pay the rent. He tells the protagonist to get a part-time job to cover the expenses. He wonders if it's about money again and if the grandmother has already given him money. The boy worries about his sister and wonders if he'll have to get a job. He hates himself for wanting to run away to Mole Island at that moment. The uncle says he feels sorry for them and that they were unlucky to have poor parents. He says that Mole Island is a miserable place, and the protagonist stares at him. The man says that the island was where criminals were sent to die. He says that people pretended to be happy but died or left the island. The uncle accuses him of being a foolish ignorant for continuing to dive like his mother. He remembers his mother and how she was happy despite all the hardships. The man mocks her, saying that she wasn't very smart and didn't have a brain. The protagonist confronts him and asks if she was more ignorant than the uncle. He accuses him of having divorced because he cheated on his wife, making the uncle furious. The sister hears the fight and remembers when her brother protected her. She becomes breathless and her heart races, afraid of what might happen. In the living room, the uncle says that Hai is not afraid of adults because he was never beaten as a child. He looks at him with contempt, and the protagonist stares back in anger. Meanwhile, the water from the broken jar was spreading. Looking at everything on the floor, the protagonist becomes afraid the mermaid might appear. He shouts for his sister not to come out and says that it's fine, trying to calm her down. Immediately, he takes off his shirt to try to dry the floor. Seeing that, his uncle asks if the boy is acting strange because he's scared. He kicks him and says he'll go easy on him today, leaving the room. The sister opens the door and calls him, but he tells her not to come into the room. She gets worried and says she brought bandages to take care of his wounds. The girl apologizes while crying and he asks why she's apologizing. She says that he protected her when their uncle hit her and that she couldn't help him. He says that it's fine and that he'd feel worse if she got hurt. The protagonist tells her to come in and that they have school the next day. He thinks that he's not afraid of his uncle and could fight back if he wanted to. He feels as if the mermaid's power were his own and feels stronger. The boy lies down and thinks it's natural to depend on her but doesn't know how to accept it. At school, the representative calls him and looks at him with a worried expression. She says that the teacher wants to see him in the counseling room and he agrees. He thinks that it's a blessing to have a trustworthy adult but that he wasn't that lucky. The protagonist enters the room and the teacher greets him, asking him to sit down. She says she heard about the incident with the boys and asks what happened. He says it wasn't a big deal and that it was partly his fault for acting badly. The teacher offers to talk to the boys and he refuses her help. He says he doesn't need it and that things will only get worse if she interferes. She suggests that he seek help at the student counseling center. The boy is surprised by the suggestion and suddenly someone knocks on the door. A man enters and the teacher greets him with a smile on her face. She introduces him as the student counselor, Mr. Taeyeon Mun. He thinks that the counselor was a good man, the kind of person he wanted to be. The thought torments him and he feels bad for getting involved with the mermaid. The teacher says that Mr. Mun is very popular and that he agreed to see him. She says it was a surprise and that he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. He silently agrees and the teacher looks at him waiting for a response. The boy says he wants to talk about something and turns to them, gathering courage. The teacher gets startled and asks if he wants her to leave, but he says it's fine. He asks if there's a way for a minor to make a lot of money in a short time. The counselor asks if he's having financial problems and the teacher suggests a program. He sighs and realizes it will take months to get the money he needs. The boy refuses the help and says he needs the money now, thanking them and leaving. The counselor calls him and asks why he doesn't show up on rainy days. He says he heard that he has difficulties when it rains and that he can go there to spend time. The boy is surprised and wonders if he should go when it rains, thinking about the offer. He thinks that the boys will bully him if he stays in the classroom. The boy thinks the teacher is suggesting that so he doesn't make the others uncomfortable. He wonders if the counselor will really leave him alone if he goes to the center. But more importantly, he wonders if Yoon-hae will leave him alone. The boy thinks that if someone has to die, it would be better one than many. He shakes off the thoughts and says he'll think about the teacher's offer. The teacher apologizes to the counselor and he says it wasn't her fault. She says she was desperate to help him and ended up cornering the boy. The counselor tells her not to blame herself and that she didn't harm his reputation. He says he doesn't know Hai Seong well, but that he doesn't seem like the type to ask for help. The man tells her not to feel bad and that she did her best as a teacher. At home, he tells his sister that they need to save money from now on. And the little girl reveals that she has something to tell. She reveals that she already called their grandmother and that she told them not to worry about anything. The protagonist gets startled and asks if she told her about the conversation with their uncle. The sister says she didn't tell how angry he got and that he doesn't need to worry. Furious, he calls her a fool and asks how she could be so childish. He says that their grandmother is not well and that she's forced to work because of them. The boy yells that she risks her life every day to support them in the city. He reminds her that they're not real grandchildren and that they're complete strangers. The girl cries and says that she has no money and doesn't know what to do. He regrets yelling and the doorbell rings, interrupting the argument. A woman appears and says she's looking for something to wear, leaving him confused. She says the shoes look expensive and that she's already on her way to meet him. The woman turns to him and compliments him, saying he's adorable. She explains that the heel broke and that the uncle sent her to get a new pair. The woman throws the old shoes away and says goodbye, saying they'll see each other soon. He stares at the shoes and realizes that his uncle is lying about their financial situation. The boy goes to the kitchen, and his sister asks where he's going. He goes down the stairs and says he can't stand that unbearable situation anymore. The boy throws the water on the floor and sits down, not knowing what to do with his life. He feels lost, and the image of the mermaid appears in the water like a reflection. The boy thinks that the April sea is cold enough to stop his heart. Under the moonlight, he calls for Yoon-hae and asks if she likes him. She hugs him and says yes, that she likes him very much, more than he can imagine. He doesn't understand and says that there's no reason for her to like someone like him. She asks what she can do to make him believe and looks at him tenderly. He hates himself for being so powerless and for not being able to change anything. The boy hates himself for not having parents and for not having any friends at school. She comforts him and says that he has no reason to hate himself like that. The mermaid says that he doesn't need to be an adult and that she will always protect him. He asks if he has no friends because of her, and the mermaid stares at him. She says she understands and that she knows what he's afraid of, trying to calm him. The mermaid says she won't go to his school, even when it rains, to leave him in peace. She asks him to promise that he'll believe how much she cares about him. The mermaid says she'll love him even more so he can learn to love himself. Back at school, he sees the counselor's reflection in the window and feels guilty. He remembers the mermaid's promise but knows that's not the only reason he doesn't fit in. In class, the teacher tells everyone to find different examples for the group activity. The girls complain, saying they're doomed for ending up in his group. A classmate asks if he knows what class it is and teases him, mocking him. A girl asks why he goes to school if he doesn't want to be there and insults him. Another classmate says she's not trying to fight but wants to know why he goes at all. She says he's completely useless and doesn't contribute anything in class. He couldn't keep up with the lessons and was a nuisance in group projects. The protagonist feels out of place and doesn't know what to do to change the situation. He goes to the counseling center and knocks on the door, making a decision. The boy enters the room and the counselor welcomes him with a gentle smile. The counselor greets him and asks if he enjoyed his lunch at school. He asks if he has to do the counseling and the counselor looks at him. The man says they can talk whenever he wants and invites him to go out. He shows him the club room and says that the protagonist can use it anytime he wants. The counselor says they only use the room when the club has meetings and lets him in. He turns on the light and shows the place, inviting the boy to step inside. The man says there are many books and that he can read if he wants to pass the time. He also shows him a Bluetooth speaker and explains how to use it to listen to music. The counselor says he can use everything without asking permission and asks if he has any questions. He tells him to look for him if he wants to talk and says goodbye, wishing him a good stay. The boy enters the room and the counselor closes the door, leaving him alone. He looks at the bookshelf and realizes it's been a long time since he read anything. The protagonist crouches down and sees that most of the books are about psychology. He gets interested in the titles and starts exploring the shelf with curiosity. The boy picks up one of the books and starts taking a look. From the cover, he feels that the subject must be very interesting. When he stands up, he sees the silhouette of the mermaid by the window. His heart races because they had agreed that she wouldn't come there anymore. The boy approaches the window and opens the curtains, but there was nothing there, only the rain falling. Then he thinks it must be his imagination since she promised she wouldn't appear there. He goes back to the table and tries to focus but can't get the image out of his head. The boy finds an activity sheet and sees that the other students have already filled it out. He thinks that the counselor and the others grew up in happy and safe homes. The boy feels out of place and realizes they're not like him, an orphan. Suddenly a wet hand touches his, and the image of the mermaid appears in front of him. She looks at him coldly and asks what she is to him after all. The protagonist is speechless, not knowing what to say to her, but he realizes that nothing is really there, as if the mermaid were exerting power over him. In the teacher's room, Professor Lim hands a drink to another colleague. The woman asks what it is, and Professor Lim gives the gift with a note. She explains that Hai Seong is going to counseling and hopes the other will understand. The teacher says she wanted to tell her in person, but the other looks at her with disdain. She says she doesn't agree, and that it's just a way to help him run away from his problems. The woman suggests he's pretending to skip class, and Professor Lim denies it. She says that if he doesn't keep up, it will be Professor Lim's fault, and tells her to take the drink. Professor Lim throws the drink away and complains about the old-fashioned teachers at the school. Back in the room, the counselor comes in and apologizes for interrupting Hai Seong. He says not to worry and starts organizing some papers on the desk. The protagonist says he can do that there, and the counselor is surprised. The man asks which book he's reading and if the title attracted him somehow. Hai Seong says he was curious but that what he's reading makes him uncomfortable. The counselor agrees that the first chapter is difficult and asks which part bothered him. The protagonist says that the fact his current situation feels like a cage bothers him. The counselor asks what his situation is, and Hai Seong trembles, not knowing what to say. Then he explains to the boy that the book frustrated him because it reminded him of his past, but helped him learn later. The protagonist keeps reading the book, trying to find a way to escape. Hai Seong asks what happens if there are many cages, and the counselor thinks. He holds some papers and tries to find an answer to the boy's question. The counselor explains that if he manages to escape the first layer, he'll be able to get out of the rest. He says that when the time comes, the protagonist will already know how to set himself free. Back in the classroom, he's surprised to see that his seat has been moved. The representative points to the new spot and says he can sit there now. She explains that the seat changed while he was away and looks at him seriously. He sits next to the representative, and the two stay silent for a while. The girl asks if he did the math homework and offers her notebook for him to copy. She says she doesn't want to hear the teacher complain and doesn't want the class to be delayed. He says he doesn't have a notebook, and the girl stares at him, not understanding the excuse. The representative takes a new notebook from her backpack and offers it to the protagonist. She tells him to use it, and he thanks her, still a bit embarrassed by the situation. He sits back down and feels pathetic for having to accept her help. Back in the bathroom, he asks Yoon-hae if she feels lonely in the water all the time. The mermaid says yes, and that it can be painful to be alone for so long. He says he can help her and invites her to live with him on Mole Island. She asks if he will dedicate himself to her if they go to the island right now. The mermaid asks if he can forget everything and care only about her. He remembers his uncle and sister and realizes he can't abandon everything like that. And the mermaid herself says that it's not the right time yet. He wonders why he needs to go to school if she won't even see him there. The mermaid says he can't focus on her because of his uncle and sister. She says he needs a human to help him and that he can only find one at school. The mermaid says she can help him too and that the choice is his, after all. He hears his uncle laughing with his girlfriend and feels even more disgusted with him. The protagonist thinks that humans become ugly when they have nothing left to lose. He goes back to the counseling center and the counselor greets him with a smile. The man asks if he visited the support center and how the experience was. Hai Seong sits down and says he's not sure if it was useful for his situation. He explains that he qualifies for the program, but the amount is less than what he needs. The protagonist says he needs his uncle's consent to receive the money. The counselor asks what's going on at home and says he wants to help if he can. He says he can only help if he knows the situation, and Hae Seong becomes thoughtful. The protagonist reveals that his parents passed away and that he lives with his uncle and sister. He says that his uncle's business went bankrupt and that he's using his grandmother's money. The counselor says it's a pity but that the situation isn't fair to him and his sister. He asks what the uncle is like and Hae Seong says he only cares about alcohol and women. The man realizes that the uncle isn't someone he can trust and Hae Seong agrees. The protagonist apologizes for not giving much information about his life. The counselor says it's okay and that it's hard to talk about problems. Hae Seong vents and says he's been having selfish thoughts lately. He says he no longer feels envy toward others because his life is far from normal. And he asks what's wrong with him. The man says that what he shared is something no one could endure alone. He says that the protagonist is incredible and that his sister is lucky to have him as a brother. The counselor says it's not his fault and that it's understandable that he wants to run away. He says it's okay to admit that he's exhausted and that he needs to take care of himself. The protagonist is moved and feels warmth in his heart from the comforting words. He wonders how he can feel so comforted by someone he barely knows. The counselor invites him to continue the conversation tomorrow, and he becomes pensive. Hae Seong says he's not sure and apologizes, not knowing what to do. The man says it's okay and that he can come whenever he feels like talking. Lying in bed, he gets up and decides to do something about the situation. Hae Seong takes the book the counselor gave him and becomes curious about the ending. At school, the representative hands in the homework and says it's a bit long. He says it's fine and takes the paper, surprising the girl with his attitude. She asks if he did the homework and he confirms, leaving the representative shocked. The two do the assignment together, and he feels a little more at ease in class. The protagonist realizes that he and the book are progressing slowly but together. He feels himself changing and starts to accept help from others little by little. The book asks if he will escape, and a tear falls on the page, wetting the paper. The image of his crying friend appears and he feels guilty for pushing him away. The protagonist stands up and realizes that his guilt has also faded with time. He sits in the room and notices that the two rooms were divided by a wall. Sometimes he hears the tearful voices of students being counseled in the other room. A girl cries and says her boyfriend ignores her and that she can't live without him. Another student says his father doesn't understand him and that he doesn't think his life will get better. The protagonist stares into nothingness and thinks that his life will never get better. In the classroom, a girl offers snacks to the representative who accepts them. She asks if it's not shocking and the representative asks what's shocking. The girl points at Hae Seong and says he's studying, which is a surprise. A friend reveals that he used to get good grades and that he was one of the best students. The representative says that what he needs now is to learn to socialize with others. She stands up and goes to her desk feeling a bit uncomfortable. At that moment, the protagonist calls her and the representative turns, surprised by the call. He apologizes and asks if he can borrow the math notebook. She hands over the notebook and he thanks her, taking the material. The representative stares at him and he starts copying the notes without looking at her. Looking at the notebook, she asks if he's not going to copy the answers. He looks at the girl without saying anything. He explains that he's getting the answer wrong and wanted to see how she solved the problem. So the girl explains to him exactly where Hae was making a mistake. Then she says she wants to ask him a question. The protagonist is surprised and says she's better at math than he is. The girl says the question is about him and looks at him with a serious gaze. He asks what it is and she wants to know which university he wants to go to in the future. The boy says he's not going to college and the representative asks why he's studying then. She feels close-minded and says that going to college isn't the only possibility. He says he stopped studying when he decided he wouldn't go to university. That's why he quit. The girl asks if he found another reason to study and he looks at her. Hae Seong says he feels better studying and that it's better than doing nothing. Two students walk by and one of them draws attention to the representative and Hae. He laughs and the classmates start whispering about the two being together. The representative apologizes for the situation. He asks what she's apologizing for and she says they're mocking him. The representative says that the insults are immature and that they don't bother her at all. He smiles and says he's relieved to hear that from her, feeling better. The two study in silence and the girl watches him, thoughtful about him. In the cafeteria, she thinks she's never seen him there before and looks for him. A friend calls her and she says she's not looking for anyone, changing the subject. A classmate calls her and says the teacher wants to see her after lunch. The teacher asks if something happened and how Hae Seong is doing. She says he's changed so much that she doesn't think he needs help anymore. The teacher feels happy and thanks her for helping the protagonist. The girl gets embarrassed and says she didn't do much but is happy to help. The teacher asks her to keep helping and to let her know if it gets too hard. The representative says tomorrow's class will be in pairs and that she can invite him. The teacher gets excited and says she'd be very grateful if she did that. But then she remembers something. She says that the protagonist won't be in class the next day, leaving the girl confused. In a flashback, the mermaid asks if he's going to see his mother tomorrow, and he confirms. She asks how. He explains that he's going to the columbarium because tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of her death. The mermaid asks if he misses her, and he looks at her thoughtful about the question. With a sad look, he confirms that yes, he misses his mother very much. She asks if he's still sad. He breaks down and says yes, that he still feels the loss deeply. He says that in the past few days he's been trying to get better, that he's doing his best, and that now he's feeling okay. She asks if he's made a friend, and he denies it with a slightly sad look. And she insists, asking if talking about the past would help. He's surprised and asks what she means by that. Confused. She says she wants to talk about his mother. He asks if she means the day they were looking for shells. The mermaid says she wants to talk about the day his mother got hurt. He stares at her, shocked, unable to believe what he just heard. He asks if she was there that day, and from the sound of it she saw everything from the bottom of the sea. The scene returns to that day, and the divers prepare to go into the water. His foster grandmother asks his mother to be careful because the tide is high. She smiles and says it's fine, promising to come back soon. Right after, she dives into the water, and the mermaid watches her from afar, curious about her presence. The boy's mother searches for something at the bottom of the sea, and the mermaid watches her. The sea becomes rough, but his mother doesn't notice because she's underwater. Suddenly, she rises to the surface and is startled by the strength of the waves. She even tries to be pulled back, but the current is very strong. Soon a gigantic wave surrounds her, leaving no way out. With the force, she ends up being thrown against a rock and hits her head. Seeing all that, the mermaid looks at the shell she had received. She looks at the wounded body of his mother floating unconscious. The protagonist is in shock as he listens to everything. The mermaid says that unconscious, the tide carried his mother far away, making it hard to find her. She even describes how the woman's face looked, pale, with blood coming from her nose. Out of patience, Hai grabs the girl and yells for her to stop talking about it. Crying, he asks why she's telling him that and says now he knows she could have helped his mother but did nothing. In response, she says she tried to help her, but her instinct took over. Still crying hard, he orders her to stop describing how his mother died. Confused, the mermaid says she didn't know it would hurt him and thought it would feel good to remember his mother. Out of patience, the protagonist asks if she's doing this because she thinks he should only miss her and no one else. Wiping her tears, the girl says that's not true and that she just thought he wanted to hear about her. And with a bizarre smile, she says that if he died without her presence, she'd want to know every detail of how it happened. She says she'd want to know how his eyes lost their light and what his last breath was like. Taking action, Hai pushes her away. He looks shocked and says that all of this is very strange. A little embarrassed, she says they've come back to the same question again. With an even more unsettling look, she asks why he pushed her and says she didn't do anything wrong to him. She says she didn't kill his mother and asks why he's angry at her. She says she was doing that for him and looks at him with an innocent gaze. The scene changes, and the grandmother cries over the death of her friend, missing her deeply. The protagonist and his sister say goodbye, and he feels even lonelier in the world. He stares at his mother's ashes, and a tear runs down his face in pure pain. At school, the counselor announces that they will have a psychological evaluation in class. He tells everyone to answer the questions honestly and hands out the papers. The protagonist stares at the paper and starts answering the test questions. He marks the option always for the questions about feeling weak and having no appetite. With the pen in hand, he circles the option and continues answering the test. The boy thinks about everything he's been through and wonders how he will keep living. He marks that his life is a failure and that he wants to die, feeling guilty. The boy fills out the test and marks the highest option for the darkest questions. The counselor says that his evaluation result was concerning and needs attention. The teacher says she thought he was getting better since he was participating more. The man becomes thoughtful and tries to find a way to help the boy improve. He enters the room and finds the protagonist sleeping on the desk and wakes him up. The counselor invites him to lunch and says he'll buy something delicious for him. In the hallway, they meet the representative, and she stares at them with a serious look. The counselor greets the girl, and the protagonist looks at her without saying anything. She asks where he's going, and he says he's going to lunch with the counselor. With that, the girl tells them to have fun. At the restaurant, the counselor asks him to eat, and Haesung thanks him for the kindness. He explains that he doesn't eat in the cafeteria because he doesn't like crowded places and never paid. The man says he understands and hopes he eats a lot that day. He comments that it seems the protagonist is good friends with the student from earlier. The protagonist says they're not close and that she's only watching him at the teacher's request. The counselor asks if that's what she said, and Haesung stays silent. He says no, but that it's obvious since he can't think of any other reason. The man comments that the weather is beautiful and that ice cream would be nice that day. Hae-seun asks if he's that kind to all students, and he smiles. The counselor says he was worried and wanted to get to know him better to be able to help. He tells the protagonist to let him know if he makes him uncomfortable, and Hae-seun thinks. The boy reveals that he's become very comfortable with him and with the club room. He says he feels like he can talk about anything, and that scares him a little. The counselor asks if he thinks he's going to get hurt, and Hae-seun looks at him. He reveals himself as a professional counselor and says he doesn't get hurt by what students say. The man says what hurts is seeing them suffer and that he hates seeing them in pain. He says he wants to help the protagonist find his life again, just like it used to be. Hae-seun breaks down and asks for help, finally opening up to the counselor. While the rain falls, the mermaid relaxes as if nothing had happened. The protagonist can't understand why she didn't help his mother that day, but apparently that girl doesn't care much about feelings. At school, the counselor watches him as the rain keeps falling outside the room. He comments that it won't stop raining and asks if it was hard to postpone the session, but Hae's thoughts are far away. Hae-seun apologizes and the counselor asks why he's apologizing. He says he feels anxious on rainy days and that it's hard to talk about it. The man suggests they try a written conversation, and he agrees. He says the space can be a safe place and that only the two of them will be there. The counselor assures that everything discussed will stay between them. The protagonist says he doesn't know what to talk about, and the counselor encourages him. He says it can be anything he wouldn't tell other people. The boy stays silent and thinks about what to say, feeling a little lost. He starts by saying it's a hypothetical situation, and the counselor listens. The protagonist asks what he would do if his best friend were in trouble. He asks what he would do if his best friend killed someone who threatened him, but also what he would do if that friend killed someone precious to him. The protagonist asks how he would feel, and if the friend would be good or a murderer. He also asks if it would be neutral, for having done something good and bad at the same time. The counselor wonders why he's giving such a dramatic and specific example. He says he wouldn't see the friend as a good person and that he'd feel temporary relief, but he would develop a new fear of that friend and distance himself from him. The protagonist asks if that wouldn't be selfish and that he should feel grateful. He writes if that wouldn't make him a psychopath for forgetting his debt to the friend. The boy passes the notebook to the counselor, and he starts reading the answer. He apologizes and says he didn't mean to call him a psychopath, explaining himself. The counselor wonders if Hae-seun is the victim or the aggressor in the story. He says it's rare for someone not to feel grateful, even if saved by a murder. The man says he wouldn't see the friend as a savior but as a threat. He says he'd be so afraid that he'd walk on eggshells around the friend all the time, and if he were forced to stay, he would feel suffocated, even traumatized. The counselor explains that the pain wouldn't go away because he would have lost a friend. He feels like he's discovered something he shouldn't have known and feels even more confused. The protagonist writes that even if he fears the friend, she's the only one who understands him. He asks if he would be able to leave her, and the counselor looks at him. The man says it sounds like a very intimate relationship and that it would be hard to leave, but he considers the relationship sick, since the person hurt and traumatized him. The counselor says he would reevaluate the relationship and try to find a way to protect himself. He says that this shouldn't happen even in a normal relationship and that it's obsession. The protagonist thanks him and says the conversation was very helpful to him. The counselor asks if something similar happened to him, and Hae-seun looks at him. He decides to tell the truth and starts to explain why he's afraid of the rain. The boy reveals that he's not afraid of the rain, but of water, especially around other people. He says it's because someone watches him from the water, and the counselor listens. The counselor asks who watches him, and he says the man won't believe him. He says it's important to talk and asks the protagonist to trust him and tell. Hae-seun's heart races, and he gathers the courage to reveal the truth. He says he'll only tell because he trusts him, and the counselor listens. The protagonist swallows hard and prepares to tell the secret that haunts him. He reveals that it's a mermaid who watches him from the water and that she's his friend. The counselor stays silent and asks if he's talking about a real mermaid. Hae-seun confirms yes, and the man stares at him trying to process the information. The counselor asks if it's a metaphor, and he denies it, saying it's literal. The man asks if it's a creature half human and half fish, and he confirms. Hae-seun says he knows it's hard to believe and asks him to believe him. He says he sees her every day and that she appears anywhere there's water. The counselor asks if he can see and touch her, and the protagonist confirms. He says he met her in his hometown, and that she reappeared in the school bathroom. The boy asks if people don't believe in mermaids, and the counselor looks at him. He asks if the counselor doesn't believe him, and if he thinks he's crazy. The man says he believes him, but that he's worried about his health and the harm the mermaid causes. He suggests that Hae-seun seek medical help to recover and become healthier. The protagonist writes that the counselor doesn't believe him and taps the pen on the table. He leaves the room, and the man calls out to him, but Hae-seun walks away, irritated. In the hallway, he feels like a fool for opening up to the counselor. He wonders why he got himself into this and regrets telling the truth. In the classroom, the teacher tells the students to focus on their homework. The representative stares at him, and he feels even more uncomfortable in the room. He lays his head on the desk and feels frustrated with the situation he got into. The protagonist wonders why he pushed away the only person who tried to help him. He remembers writing that the counselor didn't believe him and feels bad. The boy regrets it and says he got so scared that he ended up running away from the conversation. He remembers the counselor's words and feels a bit calmer. Hae-sung thinks he's never had an adult like him in his life and feels grateful. The protagonist decides he needs to apologize and that he shouldn't have run away. He goes to the counseling room and stops in front of the door, hesitant. The boy gathers courage and opens the door, peeking inside the room. He finds the room empty and enters, feeling a bit disappointed. The protagonist sits on the chair and thinks he needs to apologize properly. He hears the conversation from the next room and is surprised by what he hears. The teacher says his symptoms sound like a serious delusion and that he needs help. The counselor asks if he can accompany him, but the teacher says no. She explains that the hospital isn't responsible and that a family member is needed. The man asks what the diagnosis is, and she says they suspect schizophrenia. The teacher suggests contacting the uncle, but the counselor thinks it's better to talk to Hae-sung. Suddenly the door bursts open and the protagonist enters, furious about the conversation. He heard everything and feels betrayed, unable to believe they were talking about him. The teachers try to explain. Shouting, Hae-sung says that he actually wishes he were schizophrenic so he could get better with medication. He says he understands they don't believe him, but they shouldn't minimize his situation. The teacher says it must have been hard and that now she's going to help him get better. Then the boy asks if by any chance the teacher will become friends with the mermaid to make her disappear from his life. Approaching, the counselor holds his arm and says he doesn't understand everything he's going through. He says that the boy will get better with medication and that he'll help him recover. Hae-sung says that if it were possible to fix it with medicine, he'd love that, but they're wrong. He yells that he'll never take any medicine unless it's to kill himself. The teacher gets angry and says he should never say something like that. Confused, he yells that he doesn't need any of them. Another teacher appears and asks what's going on there, confused by the scene. She asks why he's yelling at the teachers and stares at him angrily. Professor Lim talks to the other teacher and calls her with a serious tone into the room. The woman says she was understanding when she sent the notice about the counseling. She complains that the boy became even more agitated and was yelling at the teachers. The teacher says that happened because she trusted the counselor and apologizes. She reveals that Hae-sung is suspected of having a severe mental illness and needs care. The woman gets irritated and says she didn't ask about his condition but what she's going to do. Professor Lim says she was discussing it with Mr. Mun, but no hospital will accept him. The other teacher laughs and says the situation is ridiculous, picking up the phone. She calls the office and asks for the contact list of the students' guardians. The woman tells Professor Lim to contact his guardian and send him to the hospital. The representative calls the protagonist and says that Professor Lim wants to see him in the room. He goes to the teacher's room and finds her waiting for him at the door. She calls him inside and the protagonist looks at her, a bit uneasy about the conversation. The teacher thanks him for coming and says she's happy to see him there. She says that he doesn't communicate well and that he's been problematic in class. The protagonist looks at his uncle and realizes he's there in the waiting room. The man greets him and calls him to go into the doctor's office with him. The doctor asks what his symptoms are and the uncle begins to explain. He says that his nephew sees mermaids in puddles and that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The doctor asks him to explain the symptoms in more detail and looks at him. He asks if the boy really sees mermaids, and the protagonist looks at him. The boy denies it and says he doesn't see things like that, trying to get out of the situation. The uncle scolds him and tells him to tell the truth, but the boy refuses. He gets angry and says that the protagonist is making a fool of him in front of the doctor. The doctor asks for a moment and the uncle stands up with a furious expression. He grabs the water jug and throws it over his nephew's head, soaking him completely. The man yells, asking what he's doing, and the doctor looks at him in shock. He orders the boy to look at the water and say if he sees a mermaid there now. The doctor calls the nurse and asks her to escort both of them out of the room. The protagonist stares into nothingness and feels humiliated and powerless with the situation. In the car, the uncle threatens him, saying he'll regret it when they get home. He says he'll make him wish he had pretended to be mentally ill to stay in the hospital. The protagonist looks at him and says, "Whatever," with a mocking smile on his face. The uncle gets angry and asks if he has some kind of death wish or something. He says he's been too soft and that he'll teach both him and his sister a lesson today. The boy fastens his seatbelt and prepares for what's coming. He curses at him, and the uncle gets furious, unable to believe his nephew's audacity. The man says he really is sick in the head and threatens him again. He says it's over for him once they get home, and the protagonist smiles. In the school bathroom, the teacher cries, worried about the student's situation. She receives a message and the counselor asks if Hae-sung is in class. He says he's worried and wants to talk to him when the boy calms down. She turns off the phone and cries even more, feeling helpless about the situation. Soon after, he arrives home and asks his sister to stay out of the house for 3 hours. The sister asks why and he smiles, telling her to hurry and leave. The uncle says he's going to teach her a lesson too. He threatens and says that if she leaves, both of them will get beaten even more. The girl trembles and the protagonist says she can't take the beating for him. He whispers for her to go and the sister looks at him with a frightened expression. The girl clenches her fists, not knowing what to do. Once again, her brother tells her to go. The poor girl is very scared and sweating cold. The man says that neither of them is smart and that it will be worse for her. He orders the protagonist to change clothes and says he doesn't want blood on the uniform. The uncle cracks his neck and prepares to beat his nephew. He turns around and the protagonist looks at him with a gaze full of pure rage and contempt. The man asks where he thinks he's going, and the boy opens the refrigerator. He grabs a pitcher of water, then he throws it on the floor and the uncle yells, saying he's begging for a beating. He says it's over and that he was wrong all along, kneeling in the water. The uncle smiles as he hears Hai Seong talking about sacrificing himself, but he realized he was wrong and that the situation will never get better. The protagonist says that the mermaid is right and that those who hurt him don't deserve to live. The man asks who he's talking to and looks at him with a contemptuous expression. Hai Seong says he doesn't care who dies and that he won't try anymore. He says he knows money and a good family are out of reach for him. The boy says he'll stop being moral and that he needs Yoon Hae more than ever. The uncle gets irritated and grabs him by the collar, shouting that he's a bastard. He threatens him and asks if he thinks he's not being serious. The man says he'll beat him until he begs to be killed, but Hai Seong stares at him. The mermaid appears and asks what he wants her to do with a cold look. He asks her to kill his uncle in the most painful way possible. While staring at a knife, his uncle starts coughing. The protagonist holds that knife while listening to the insults. The mermaid is drowning the man in the water and Hai watches with the knife in his hand. Before being completely taken under, the uncle calls his nephew ungrateful for having taken him and his sister in. Approaching, Hai calls for his uncle. He says that in this situation the man should be begging for forgiveness, but since that didn't happen, he's going to teach the lesson now. And there he and the mermaid finish the job. He still has one hand sticking out and the girl says he isn't dead yet. She explains that since he asked for the death to be the most painful, it's taking longer to end completely. And outside, both the mermaid and the protagonist stare at the scene entranced. Smiling, he asks if she thinks he failed this time. He says he has no life to ruin. The protagonist remembers the counselor and how he was a good person. He thinks it would have been easier if the counselor had been a bad man. The mermaid asks if he brought a knife, and he confirms while the uncle coughs. He says he's no longer interested in trying and the uncle begs him to stop. The protagonist calls the mermaid and tells her to wait. He says this is wrong and that he can't let the mermaid do all the work. The uncle pleads and says that Hai Seong would never do something like that to him. The boy grabs the knife and the mermaid looks at him with a surprised expression. He says he can't depend on her forever and that he will kill his uncle. The protagonist tells her to continue and says he will fill the bathtub with water. The mermaid hugs him and the two look happy. Suddenly the doorbell rings and a woman appears at the apartment door. She says she arranged to meet the uncle, but Hai Seong says he's not home. Meanwhile, the mermaid is in the bathtub with the uncle. He says that the uncle told her not to come back anymore. And the woman gets upset with the news. She freaks out and asks why he's breaking up with her, not understanding. The protagonist says that the uncle said her perfume is disgusting and that he found someone else. The woman leaves, furious. Then he removes the cloth on his head, stained with blood. He washes the knife because now the job is done. The mermaid throws hot water on his face to clean the mess. The two have their faces very close to each other. Trying to kiss her, he thanks the girl for what she did. Soon after, someone appears in the bathroom. He feels as if his innocent friend who lost his life is watching. Even though he wants to be happy, the pain of losing his friend doesn't fade. Then Hai Seong grabs the knife and holds it tightly. The girl grabs his arm, trying to stop him. She asks what exactly he's doing. Crying, he explains that she herself said he didn't need anyone tormenting him. And the girl says that he was the one who said that today, and she questions why she's still alive. With that, Yoon Hae makes him throw the knife away and asks him to look at her. She says he's confused and that he's excited because it's his first murder. He says he's never been so clear-headed and that it's time for them to disappear. The mermaid says she doesn't want him to get hurt, but he says she's the one who hurts him. He says he doesn't know if he's alive or dead and that he can't be alive because of her. She says that's why she loves him so much and that she came to love him even more. He remembers her promise that she would die with him and that they would do it now. The protagonist screams and asks when she will die, begging her to die. She touches his hand and says she feels hurt by his words. The mermaid opens her arms and asks if he will hug her, with a sad look. He cries and looks at her with a broken heart, not knowing what to do. The protagonist hugs her and she comforts him with a look of pure sorrow. He pulls the drain and the mermaid can't believe what's happening. She asks if this is really what he wants and looks at him with sadness. but then she pushes him away so he won't be pulled down too. The protagonist mutters with her malicious face. She says she will disappear from his life but will be watching him every moment. The mermaid asks if he thinks he can live without her after committing a murder. She says he won't be able to live without her and that he'll always remember her. He says he's more than used to her spying on him and that he'll be fine. The mermaid says he'll find out how foolish she's being and that she'll be waiting. She tells him to say her name and that she'll forget everything and come back to him. He refuses and says he'll never say her name until the day he dies. She says she'll wait as long as it takes and looks at him with sadness. And so she leaves and he stays there in the bathtub thinking. At the counseling center, someone knocks on the door and the counselor tells them to come in. The counselor is surprised to see the protagonist standing at the door. He bows and apologizes for what happened, saying he reacted badly. The man says it's alright, that he's not upset, and thanks him for coming back. He comments that he heard the protagonist went to the hospital and that he was worried. Hae-sung smiles and says that he's fine now, trying to reassure the counselor. In the classroom, the representative looks at him and he sits down thoughtful. She asks if he's studying and he says he's just reading the book. The girl picks up the book and starts asking questions about the science material. He answers correctly and she's surprised by his knowledge. The representative says it seems like he studied a lot and he agrees, a little embarrassed. She jokes, saying he seems annoying now, and he laughs awkwardly. He remembers how he started reading to distract himself from his uncle's death. The protagonist devoted himself to studying and found refuge in the science books. He thinks that maybe the book helped him forget that the mermaid was watching him. The representative says he's smart and that his grades will rise quickly. The representative says he's being very nice and suggests he choose geoscience. He says maybe and wonders if that day will ever really come for him. The girl looks confused and a classmate jokes, asking if the two are flirting. She calls him disgusting and the others laugh, telling them to leave the pair alone. The boy dances and says they've found love and the others laugh at the scene. The representative sighs and says they're joking around again. The protagonist watches the pranksters. Approaching one of them, he asks if the boy is having fun. While the girl watches, the boy answers that he's dying of fear in a sarcastic tone. The boy laughs and says he's having a lot of fun. The representative asks someone to call the teacher because those boys are ridiculous. Then Hai grabs the boy by the collar and the boy says that this just proves he's dating the representative. The protagonist stares at him and asks if he's scared now that he finally reacted. He pushes him and the boy falls to the floor, surprised by Hae-sung's reaction. And on the floor, he keeps holding his classmate by the neck. The representative appears and asks her friend what he was doing. In response, he says that boy is a waste of space in the world. And leaving the boy desperate, Hai says that he just needs to die. His friends try to hold him back and beg him to calm down, but he continues. The teacher appears and asks what's going on, shocked by the scene. Both he and the representative look toward the door. Finally, Hae-sung lets go of the boy's neck, who struggles to breathe. The boy explains that the protagonist was trying to kill him. The representative explains that the boys kept implying that she and the protagonist were dating. They mocked and provoked the two, and the girl tried to ignore the teasing. The teacher tells Cheolman to stop and says that Jo-hui is speaking now. She says that Hae-seon has had enough and that it's understandable he exploded. The representative says she's surprised it took him this long to snap like that. The boy complains that he almost died and that the teacher is listening to Jo-hui. She says that's enough and that she's heard things about Cheolman and knows he's not innocent. The teacher asks He why he did that and why he didn't ask her for help. He says the boy would never admit he was wrong and that he's a coward. The teacher says violence is never the answer, but he says it wouldn't have helped. He says he knew words wouldn't work and used violence because of that. She says if he believes that, he needs to learn to change how he thinks. She says that they are human and can reason, they're not animals. Leaving the classroom, the representative invites him to the snack bar and says she'll pay. The representative asks why he did that, and though she understands things are hard for him, she thinks he overreacted. He says he thought they'd never stop if he didn't do something about it. Besides that, he didn't like the way the boys were treating the girl. Although she liked the lesson he gave them, she advises him not to do anything that could get him in trouble. The protagonist asks if she liked it, and she looks at him, not understanding the question. With a smile, he says he doesn't regret teaching the classmate a lesson. At home, he asks his sister for her phone, and she asks if he's going to call their uncle. He says no and that he just needs to use her phone to make a call. The protagonist unlocks the contacts and finds the number he had blocked before. The scene changes to someone talking in a cafe. They're talking about entertainment. Suddenly, the phone rings on the table and the young man sees it's the protagonist's sister's number. He excuses himself to answer, and his friend says it's fine, that he can go. The young man answers the call thinking it's the girl, but on the line is Hae-seon. The boy waits for an answer about what the girl wanted. This young man that Hai called is his friend, and he stays there without understanding anything. The scene changes and the two siblings arrive at their grandmother's house, who welcomes them with joy. She says they must be tired and that she made a stew for them to eat. while the protagonist looks at the sea, remembering the mermaid. The grandmother asks how long the uncle has been gone, and they sit down to eat. He says it's been about 2 weeks, and that the police couldn't do anything. The grandmother asks how they lived without the uncle and without money to support themselves. He says they stretched the money from last month, and the grandmother complains that they should have told her. The protagonist asks her to send the money to his account instead of the uncle's. She agrees and says it makes sense, not questioning her grandson's request. He thanks her and says he's worried about living without an adult, but that it's better this way. The sister says that the grandmother has no idea what the uncle did to Hae-seom. He scolds her and she gets startled, with a look of fear and confusion. The girl says it's been hard for her too and that he doesn't let her talk. The grandmother comforts her and asks if something happened with the uncle, and she tells her. She reveals that he yelled at them, stole money, and brought women over. The grandmother is shocked and asks why they didn't tell her before about the abuse. She apologizes and says she thought they would be fine and that he would ignore them. The old woman blames herself and says it's her fault for not having known anything. But the protagonist says that the uncle rarely came home and that they were fine. The sister thinks she'd feel better if she told the truth, but instead feels even worse. The grandmother asks if she should stay with them in Seoul for a while, and the girl gets excited. The protagonist is shocked by the proposal and doesn't know what to say to her. The sister begs the grandmother to go with them and the old woman agrees, happy to help. She says she'll stay in the house until the uncle returns and can then look for a place to rent. The grandmother asks what he thinks and the protagonist looks at her, a little embarrassed. He asks if she's sure and she says she's getting old and needs a break. The old woman says she's worried about one thing and that she won't be able to help much. Hae-seom says yes and that they'd love to live with her, feeling relieved. He calls his sister and asks if it's great and she agrees, happy with the news. After they moved in with the grandmother, the house smelled of delicious stew. He sits down to study and the grandmother knocks on the door, calling her grandson. She says it's about his phone and that she heard children need one. The grandmother asks if she can buy him one, but he refuses, saying it's fine. The grandmother asks about the phone she bought for him and tells him to activate it again. She hugs him and says they'll get the cheapest plan, and he agrees. The sister calls him and the grandmother stands up with a gentle smile on her face. He goes to the closet and takes out a box with his old belongings. The protagonist sits on the bed and opens the box, finding his memories. He picks up the old phone and puts it to charge with a thoughtful look. The boy starts going through the phone and finds an old video recorded at school. The friend introduces himself as the handsome magician and does a trick with the eraser. He makes the eraser disappear and pretends he lost it, but the other exposes the trick. The protagonist smiles and remembers the happy moments he had with his friends. The grandmother asks about a field trip and the sister says it's after the final exam. The girl asks if she needs to bring lunch and says the grandmother will make it for her. He smiles and says it sounds nice, feeling happy with his new life. The sister says she doesn't need his help anymore because the grandmother is there to take care of her. The grandmother scolds her, but the sister says he knows she was only joking. He gets up and says he needs to leave early to study, thanking her for the meal. The sister asks if he's mad and he says no and tells her to get ready. The protagonist says goodbye and the grandmother and sister wish him a good day. At school, the representative asks how his studies are going, and he says fine. She asks if he has plans for summer vacation, and he looks at her. He says he has no plans and that maybe he'll meet up with school friends. The girl is surprised and thinks it's good that he has friends to talk to. He calls her and she gets startled, wondering if he said her name. The protagonist asks what she usually does with her friends, and she answers. She says they go to cafes, exhibitions, and the movies, normal things. He writes everything down, and the girl asks why he wants to know all that. A classmate sends a message, and the protagonist's sister responds excitedly. The representative is surprised to see the phone and asks if it's new. She asks him to open the contact list and looks at him with a curious expression. He asks if she needs to make a call and she looks at him, a little confused. The representative shakes her head and takes the phone with a slightly suspicious look. She gives him her number and invites him to the class chat, saying that Cheomin isn't there. A classmate warns that the teacher is coming, and everyone sits in their seats. The teacher enters and asks if they're excited for the summer vacation. She gives a gift to each one and the students thank her, happy with the surprise. The woman says they worked hard and wishes everyone a good summer. The representative thanks her and the students say goodbye, celebrating the vacation. She wishes him a good summer and Hae-seom looks at her, a bit embarrassed. He packs his backpack and wishes her a good summer too, with a smile. The protagonist turns to the teacher and calls her with a look of gratitude. He thanks her for taking care of him and apologizes for being a terrible student. The teacher asks if she can give him a hug and he agrees. A bit shy, she hugs him and says he wasn't terrible and that she's grateful for everything. The woman wishes him a good summer and hopes he forgets the hardships of the past. Right after, he goes to the counselor who is talking with other students. At that moment, he notices that the protagonist is there. Then he says goodbye and mentions he needs to go do his last session of the day. The counselor turns and says he's happy to see him before leaving the room. He thanks him for everything, and the counselor thanks him for improving his health. The protagonist says he's going to do the things he wanted and meet his friend. The counselor asks if he wants to talk in the room, and he shakes his head. He says he needs to go back home. The counselor tells him to rest and not to worry about anything else. He smiles and agrees, feeling lighter and more hopeful about the future. At home, his sister asks what that box was, and Hai explains it was a gift from the teacher. While he talks on the phone, the sister asks if she can open the box, and he lets her. The girl opens the box and finds a desk clock, thinking it's very cute. He tells her to keep the gift, and the sister celebrates, happy with the surprise. The boy asks her to get the bank book, a pen, and a piece of paper. He writes down the PIN number and tells her to take money if she needs anything. He asks if she knows how to withdraw money, and she confirms, saying it's at the ATM. The protagonist tells her to buy some things she wants, and the sister looks at him. At the cafe, the protagonist's old friends wait anxiously for the reunion. One of them suggests treating Hae-sung normally and not bringing up the past. They start talking about how the girl with pink hair used to like him, and she gets mad. She argues with her friends, and at that moment Hae-sung appears. Immediately everyone freezes and looks at him. A bit awkwardly, he says hello to his classmates. Everyone greets him, and his friend says it's been a long time since they last met. They even comment that he's lost weight, and the girl who liked him just stares. The atmosphere becomes a bit awkward as everyone falls silent. One of the girls even whispers to her friend that she doesn't know what to say with him there. His friend asks about the new school Hai is attending and says he's heard about it. But another girl comments that the school is the worst there is. His friend also says he heard that the principals are terrible. The protagonist chuckles. He agrees that the school is bad and that some boys fought with him on the first day. He asks his friend if he remembers Chan-Young Kim, and he smiles, saying he knows how much Hai hated that boy. With a laugh, the protagonist feels happy that he still remembers that. The boy says there are at least 5 guys like him in his class, and starts banging the table hard, saying he wants to take them all down. Agitated, Hai says the school is the worst place to be, and his friends get scared. He hits the table so hard that the soda cups tip over. The pink-haired girl is shocked by the protagonist's strange reaction. His friend calls his attention, asking if everything's okay. Not understanding, Hai asks what he means. The friend says he seems very restless and changed. The protagonist says he's no different from them and that he just thinks he's changed. He apologizes and says he got excited seeing them again after so long. Sobi tries to hide her nervousness and asks him to tell what he's been up to. Suddenly he drops the bomb, revealing that he killed his own uncle last month. He says he wanted to see his friends one more time but doesn't even know what being normal is anymore. His friends begin to take strange shapes in his mind. Hai says he feels aware of everything he does and thinks he's going insane. He wonders what his personality was like back in school. His memories are so blurred that he can't even remember who he was before. He feels that he never truly lived and was always controlled by others. The protagonist thinks he's losing his mind until a friend's voice calls out to him. He returns to reality. Sobi says they had asked how things were at home. The boy then explains that their grandmother moved in with them, making everything more stable. At that, the friend remembers that she was the lady who worked with his mother. But Hae-sung changes the subject and says the real reason they're there is something else. He reveals that he really wanted to apologize to all of them for what he did. He then calls Jae-jung, saying he needs to talk about what he said that day. He recalls the fight with his friend, saying that his words weren't from the heart. The protagonist insists, assuring Jae-jung that he truly didn't mean what he said. But the friend admits that he was also very angry with him back then. He confesses that he was even willing to fight if it meant things could go back to normal. Because of everything that was said, Jae-jung found it hard to reconnect with his friend. He remembers that it wasn't easy watching Hae-sung isolate himself like that at graduation. The friend felt bad, as if he was being avoided on purpose because of the argument. But he says that now he understands that Hae-sung needed time to deal with everything. Hae-sung feels guilty because even understanding that he kept pushing. With a distant look, he denies it, saying that's not exactly what happened. He says he should have protected his friends and that they should have opened up too. A girl comments that he didn't say anything to them, but that with Sobi it was different. Sobi gets nervous and stammers, saying that everything's perfectly fine. But the memory of him insulting her in the rain comes back, proving it wasn't fine at all. Then the protagonist suddenly stands up, drawing everyone's attention at the table. He bows deeply in front of Sobi, leaving the girl shocked by his action. With his head down, he apologizes, saying he shouldn't have spoken that way. She tries to calm him, saying that it's okay and asking him to sit down and talk. She says that she's the one who should apologize to him because she realizes she really went too far. Then he holds her hands, begging her not to think that way. He explains that he said those things because he was unstable and that he never thought badly of her. Desperate, he asks her not to say she understands and to just ignore everything. With a sad look, Sobi agrees and says she won't bring it up again. Back at the table, he apologizes to everyone and admits he doesn't deserve their forgiveness. But Jae-jong says it's alright and that he just needs to be kind to them from now on. Solbi asks if they're friends again now. In his mind, he wonders how someone so awful met such amazing people. But with a sad look, he apologizes and says he can't be their friend anymore. As they leave the cafe, the friend comments that he thought things would go back to normal, but now their bond is completely broken. The girl calls out to the friend. She says maybe it's better to call the protagonist's sister. The scene changes and Hae-sung spends his days playing video games late into the night. He stays completely focused on the screen, trying to use games as an escape from reality. After staying up all night, he finally collapses on the bed, completely exhausted. At another moment, he's at a karaoke bar, but his gaze remains empty and distant from everything. Days later, the boy goes to an art gallery, wandering alone among the people. He stops in front of a painting of the ocean that seems to call to him, titled "Come to Me." With the hood covering his face, he walks down the street, lost in thought. The scene advances a few more days and the anguish in his eyes only seems to grow. The protagonist stares at the sky with a tired expression as if he has given up. A memory takes him to the rooftop on the day of Soonben's funeral, when it didn't rain. He remembers that it was the day he himself had planned to end his life. But suddenly, he hears the sound of the rooftop door opening behind him. Surprised, he looks back and asks how the person knew he would be there. It was his sister Hae-ben, who runs to him and hugs him, saying she missed him so much. She apologizes for saying she didn't need his help anymore, feeling guilty. With a tired look, he comforts her, saying that none of it was her fault. The little girl promises to study hard and not complain, just to make him happy. Desperate, she begs him not to leave, because now they can have a good life. A memory shows the two of them as children hugging and how different things are now. He hugs her back and apologizes, knowing it had been even harder for her. At that moment, he realizes he doesn't want to die, he just wants to eat his grandmother's food. He just wanted to sleep through the night without waking up from nightmares. The boy wished to enjoy the normal things that everyone else had. At that moment, the friends arrive on the rooftop, crying. But he hasn't seen them yet because he's still hugging his sister. He cries and begs for one last chance to be happy. The scene changes to the past, where his teacher and sister were waiting for someone to pick her up. The teacher suggests calling the uncle, but little Hae-ben shakes her head, rejecting the idea. Suddenly, the little girl hears a voice calling her name and turns to look. It was little Hae-sung, running excitedly with an umbrella in his hand. He apologizes for being late, and the woman says it's all right. But the little girl makes an angry face. She starts hitting him, saying that he must have been playing soccer again. In response, the boy says he warned her he might be late because he had a math competition. Furious, the sister yells that he's selfish for caring more about the competition. He hugs his sister and apologizes, promising never to be late again. He even made special lunches for the little one, who still pouted. At home, he always took the blame for things so his sister wouldn't get hit by their aunt. He feels guilty for everything, and asks his sister for forgiveness, even when she's asleep. And now she smiles, saying she doesn't need him anymore because she has grandma. The scene changes to Hae-ben on the phone, blaming herself for saying that to her brother. She tells Solbi that she's scared and her friend asks her to keep an eye on him. The little girl then starts following her brother, watching him play video games. She also follows him to the karaoke place, waiting outside unnoticed. At the art gallery, the little one watches him from afar, hiding behind a wall. On the phone, she tells her friend that he's at the Jushong building, continuing to follow him. Hae-ben sees her brother entering the elevator as the doors begin to close. She explains to Solbi that Hae-sung just entered the elevator, making her friend tense. The panel shows the elevator going down from the 10th floor, where there are several offices. With a trembling voice, the little girl begs Solbi to come there right now. Solbi panics and says that Hae-sung is heading to the rooftop of the building. With a push, she opens the rooftop door. Fear written on her face. And there he is, sitting on the edge, staring into nothing with his phone beside him. The little girl looks at him, desperate, not knowing what to do to stop a tragedy. The two end up hugging and crying together in a moment of pure despair. The scene changes, and the counselor tries to explain that the one responsible for Hae-mao is his adoptive grandmother. But the receptionist says it's hard to treat a minor without a family member's consent. Mr. Mun whispers that it's an emergency because the boy tried to hurt himself. The receptionist sighs and asks him to wait a moment while she handles the situation. He sits down to wait with the protagonist, and the grandmother tries to calm him down. The counselor reflects that it's unfair to have to beg just to treat a minor. At that moment, the boy's name is called. The receptionist asks them to fill out the forms and go in with the guardian. That rainy night, Hae-ben wakes up to a noise. She hears her brother whimpering and gets up to see what's happening. The little girl wakes him up with a glass of water and asks him to take his medicine. With trembling hands, he thanks her, and his sister reflects on how much she hates being young. The scene changes, and Hae-ben remembers when they built a snowman together. While the girl hops around, he sees a puddle nearby and immediately gets tense. Suddenly, he holds her and asks her not to go near water when she's with him. Seeing the situation, the sister asks if he wants to go back home. Back in the room, the protagonist sleeps deeply, with the medicine on the nightstand. The sister watches him sleep and their grandmother calls her. The grandmother asks if she's not going out, but the girl says she decided not to. The old woman insists that she should go see her friends and says she'll watch over Hae-sung. Across town, her friend asks who Hae-ben's favorite idol is. The girls start arguing about which idol is the most handsome in the group. One of them asks Hae-ben who her favorite is, and the girl looks thoughtful. After the gathering, she says goodbye and realizes she's lost on her way home. To make it worse, her phone battery dies, leaving the little girl desperate. She thinks about going back to her friend's house but can't remember the address. Hae-ben starts feeling lost, not knowing what to do in that situation. She asks a stranger for help, but he's not from that neighborhood either. The girl feels pathetic, blaming herself for getting lost on the way. She worries about her brother and fears something might happen to him while she's away. Hae-ben bursts into tears, feeling helpless for not being able to protect him. Suddenly, a girl appears and asks where she lives, offering to help. The young woman agrees to take her and asks Hae-ben's age, surprised by the answer. Hae-ben asks if she's in high school, and the girl confirms she is. She comments that her brother is also in his first year and studies at Bui High. With a smile, the girl asks what Hae-ben's brother's name is. Lying in bed, he wakes up and sees his sister and Jae-hui beside him. The protagonist leaves the room and asks what's going on, confused by the visit. Jae-hui greets him and Hae-ben smiles, happy to have her friend there with her. The sister explains that she got lost and that Jae-hui brought her back home. Suddenly, the grandmother appears and asks who Hae-sung's friend is, leaving him embarrassed. Jae-hui introduces herself, and the grandmother invites her to dinner, praising the family's food. During dinner, they talk about Jae-hui also studying at Bui High. Suddenly, he picks up his phone and sends a message to the girl, who's surprised. In the message, he asks if she doesn't need to go home and that she shouldn't force herself. She replies that it's fine and praises the grandmother's cooking, saying it's delicious. The protagonist smiles and feels a bit more comfortable with her there. Hae-ben taps her utensils on the table and looks at the food with a joyful expression. She eats eagerly and seems to be having a lot of fun with Jae-hui's visit. The grandmother praises Jae-hui for being class president and for being so pretty and smart. The old woman comments that Hae-sung also used to win many awards at school. The grandmother keeps boasting about his grades, but the boy asks her to stop, embarrassed. Then she asks the representative how Hae-sung has been doing in high school, changing the subject. While eating, Jae-hui confirms that he's really very smart and kind to everyone. The scene changes and after dinner the two are left alone, with a more serious atmosphere. Outside, he walks her home and thanks her for everything she did that day. He feels indebted, but the girl says it was nothing since she got a dinner out of it. Then she asks if he's been studying at home and the boy says not much. Jae-hui wants to know why and he explains that he simply can't concentrate. She understands, saying she also finds it hard to study at home, and he agrees. The girl says she can go home by herself, and he says goodbye, telling her to take care. But the memory of his grandmother praising him comes back, making the girl thoughtful. Then Jae-hui grabs his arm, calling his name decisively. She invites him to study together during the vacation, leaving the boy surprised. The girl tells him not to waste his brain and that they'll study together tomorrow. Without giving him time to answer, Jae-hui runs off, leaving him standing there in shock. Standing in the street, he touches his face, still processing Jae-hui's unexpected invitation. Back home, his sister spies on him in the bathroom and asks why he's staring at her. With a grin, she asks if he likes Jae-hui or Solbi, leaving him embarrassed. Hae-ben says he's lucky and that she can't wait to see which one he'll choose. He washes his face and says they're just friends, trying to end the conversation. Then his sister says Jae-hui's on the phone and hands it to her brother. He answers and the friend asks how things are, trying to make small talk. Jae-hui invites him to see a movie with Solbi and he's surprised by the invitation. The next day, he and Jae-hui finish studying and she suggests they correct their work. The two sit facing each other and start checking the pages. He's surprised to see she got every question right and feels impressed. Jae-hui looks at him and he asks if he did very badly on the test, a bit awkwardly. She reveals he only missed 3 questions and looks at him with surprise. He says they were basic things, but she praises him, saying he's very smart. She suggests that maybe they'll end up going to the same university in the future. He looks at her and asks if she really thinks that could happen. Jae-hui says it would be great, and he looks at her a bit surprised by the answer. He says he'll have to study a lot since he plans to go to a good school. She asks what time he'll meet his friends and he says in 10 minutes. Jae-hui asks if he has anything to do afterward. And he says no, not really. He then invites her to watch a movie with him, leaving the girl a little embarrassed. At the theater, he asks if it's okay for Jae-hui to join them, sounding a bit nervous. The group agrees and Solbi comments that Hae-sung had been studying with a girl. He offers to pay for the tickets, saying his grandmother told him to cover the bill. The protagonist goes to the ticket counter and Jae-hui watches him from afar, thoughtful. She feels a little out of place and realizes he left her alone with his friends. The friend whispers something to Solbi and Jaehui gets curious about what they're saying. Jaehui asks if she's going to study with Hae-seung all summer and she confirms it. He wants to know how they arrange the meetings and asks if it's through Haebin. Jaehui looks confused and asks who Haebin is, if she's the protagonist's sister. The boy confirms and asks if he also talks to her using his sister's phone, leaving the girl puzzled. The scene cuts to inside the theater with the movie already on screen. They sit next to each other but the atmosphere feels tense. Solbi thinks that he doesn't have to give his number but she still feels hurt. The protagonist watches the movie silently, unaware of the tension around him. She feels upset and wonders why he didn't give his number to them. Solbi remembers the meeting with their friends and how everyone was worried. Next to him she asks if she's being too greedy, feeling a bit guilty. The scene changes and the group goes to a restaurant with Hae-seung offering to help. The three sit down to eat and Solbi tries to start a conversation with Jaehui. She asks what Hae-seung is like at school and Jaehui looks at her thoughtfully. Jaehui says he's normal and Solbi wonders why she answered so briefly. The friend jokes that she must be jealous, leaving Solbi embarrassed. She asks if the bullies still bother him and Jaehui looks surprised. Jaehui thinks about the bullies but feels uncomfortable talking about it. She suggests that Solbi should ask Hae-seung directly about the bullies. Solbi gets irritated and wonders why she can't tell her since she's his friend. Solbi says that she wasn't even with him during his worst moments and that she doesn't help at all. She reveals that Hae-seung was quiet and that only she and Jaehoon truly knew him. With a defiant look she asks how much Jaehui actually knows about the protagonist. Suddenly he returns with the food and calls Solbi, interrupting the argument. He places the bowls on the table, and the atmosphere between the girls becomes even heavier. He asks what they were talking about and Solbi says it was just a strange topic. Hae-seung says she shouldn't have started talking, leaving Solbi embarrassed. As they leave the restaurant, the group says goodbye and the mood remains a bit tense. Solbi apologizes for what she said but he tells her it's alright. He says he knows she was just trying to help and Solbi feels a little better. The friend complains that Solbi should have been more careful with her words. He approaches Jaehui and asks for her number, leaving the girl surprised. She hands him her phone and he saves the number, thanking her for her kindness. He invites her to the art school festival and says that even celebrities will be there. Jaehui agrees to go if she has time and looks at him with a mysterious expression. The friend gets all excited and his heart races after getting Jaehui's number. In the car, Solbi looks down and the friend asks why she's so sad. She says that Hae-seung told her everything was fine but obviously didn't mean it. Solbi asks if something good happened since her friend seems so cheerful. He gets embarrassed and she jokes, asking if she can playfully hit him. The scene changes and Hae-seung and Jaehui walk down the street talking about the day. He stops her and calls her by name with a serious and determined look on his face. The protagonist reveals that he wants to go to the same university as her, surprising her. He says that the field she chose is interesting and that he thinks he can do it. Jaehui says then 2 hours a day won't be enough to study. He agrees and says he doesn't know why but he feels motivated by the idea. She challenges him to memorize 60 English words per day, and he accepts the challenge. They study together and Jaehui recommends a very popular English tutor to him. She sends him the link and a notification from Jaehoon pops up on the screen. He asks if that's his friend and she says yes and that they talk sometimes. Suddenly he interrupts her and says it's not a good idea for her to talk to Jaehoon. With an awkward smile he gets tense, not knowing how to explain the situation. He then lies, saying that his friend has always been a bit of a flirt with girls. But in truth it was a blatant lie to keep the two apart. Jaehui argues that he was the one who introduced them, and that his friend wouldn't treat her badly. His heart races upon hearing that Jaehoon is worried and asking about him. She explains that the friend is just using her to get information about him since he doesn't have his number. He remembers how cowardly he was for not giving his number to his friends. The protagonist wonders why his friend thinks he's distancing himself on purpose. With a serious look he says that his friend is just making excuses to go out with her. Jaehui becomes a bit confused, not knowing whether to believe his story or not. She decides not to reply to Jaehoon's message and he looks at her with a serious expression. The protagonist feels a bit guilty about the lie but doesn't regret it. He reminds her to take her umbrella and the two say goodbye at the cafe door. The rain begins to fall and the promise of seeing her again fills him with joy. He opens the umbrella and the rain starts to fall slowly from the sky. He extends his hand and feels the raindrops touch his skin. The protagonist reflects that spending the day with Jaehui made him feel like he deserved to exist. He looks at the rain and feels happy to have found a reason to keep going. With a smile he says that he's doing fine even without the mermaid around, but she's still following him every step of the way. Back in the classroom the teacher asks everyone to pass the forms to the front. A classmate raises his hand and hands the form forward to the front of the room. On Jaehui's form she writes Hae-seung's name as her close friend. She confronts him and asks if he read her form, leaving him embarrassed. Jaehui slaps him and asks why he thought it was funny to be her only friend. He smiles and says he doesn't mind since she's also his only friend. The teacher asks if anyone wants to volunteer to be class president. Since no one offers, he decides to pick someone at random, making Jaehui tense. She volunteers and the teacher asks for her name, writing it on the board. He calls her to the front of the class and Jaehui walks up with a determined look. The teacher announces Jaehui as president and asks who wants to be the vice. A classmate volunteers and the teacher calls him to the front, writing down his name. With the two standing in front, the teacher announces that they will be the class representatives. The class applauds and the new vice president smiles with a look of pure joy. The protagonist watches the scene in silence, with a slightly distant gaze. He asks Jaehui if she's going to join any club, and she confirms. With a smile, he says he's also interested in the school's science club. She asks which class he wants to join and explains the difference between A and B. He says he'll apply for class A and she warns him that it won't be easy to pass. With a grin, he jokes that Jaehui, the science genius, will help him. He asks what the interview is like and she says they asked about her interests. Jaehui warns him that the question may change since there's a new teacher. Suddenly, the counselor appears in the hallway and greets them with a smile. Jaehui bows respectfully and greets him back, a little embarrassed. Mr. Moon greets them and Haesong looks at him with a slightly surprised expression. The protagonist stammers a hello, not knowing how to act in front of the counselor. He worries, thinking Mr. Moon will ask if he's doing all right. But the counselor only wishes them a good lunch and leaves with a smile. Jaehui asks why he got so nervous, and he looks at her awkwardly. He covers it up, saying the thought of the interview made him a little tense. The girl jokes that he's already worried about the interview and he laughs. She says it's not a university interview and there's no reason to worry. Looking at his friend, he reflects that he wants her to remember only how well he's doing now. In the cafeteria, she comments that she's going to have eye surgery because her glasses bother her. Suddenly, the vice president appears with a tray and greets the girl. He asks if he can sit with them and Jaehui agrees, a little shy. The boy asks if she knows his name and she apologizes, unable to remember. He jokes that he's hurt and introduces himself as Minju Song, the vice president. He says he remembers their names because one is the president and the other's name is unique. Minju asks if they were in the same class last year and she confirms. Jaehui asks if he knows Professor Choi and he says yes. The protagonist stays silent, thinking about how noisy the boy is. The boy starts talking about maybe joining the science club too, and Hae doesn't like it at all. The representative comments that he'd have to see the teacher all the time since he's also the class mentor. Suddenly, Minju says they need to hurry to get the new seats in class. Annoyed, the protagonist thinks about how much he dislikes this boy. Back in class, the seat lottery begins. Jaehui asks what number the classmate got and tells him to move to his new spot. The protagonist sits in his new seat, deep in thought. Now he and Jaehui are sitting in different rows. Crumpling his notebook, he reflects that he should feel happy since at least she's still in sight. He shakes his head and tries to focus but can't get Jaehui out of his mind. The boy decides he needs to work harder to be like her and that studying is the solution. He wonders if that's all and when she'll be by his side again. The protagonist realizes that the distance between them suffocates him and he feels lost. He wonders when this feeling of alienation will end, and he notices that the girl and the vice are talking a lot. That makes him very uncomfortable. He realizes that the more the girl drifts away, the more suffocated he feels. At that moment, the teacher announces that 2 students will stay to clean the classroom every day. This time, the protagonist and another girl stay behind while her friend keeps trying to hurry her. The friend threatens to leave her behind if she doesn't finish now. So Hae asks if she wants to go and offers to finish cleaning by himself. The girl thanks him and leaves, letting Haesong alone in the classroom. After finishing cleaning, he walks to the lockers with a thoughtful look. He notices something and touches Jaehui's desk, his eyes filled with pure admiration. Then he lies down on her desk because to him, Jaehui wasn't just the center of the class but of his entire world. The next day, the students talk about the class trip and get excited about going to the beach. The protagonist feels a bit uncomfortable and thinks about how much he hates crowds. A classmate asks for his food and Minju jokes that he has weird taste. Jaehui asks if he's going on the trip and he says no because he doesn't like the ocean. Mingyu insists he should go since it'll be the class's last trip of the year. The boy says he'll have fun with Jaehui, and she agrees without much enthusiasm. The protagonist gets irritated and wonders why Mingyu mentioned Jaehui all of a sudden. He stares at the form and the image of Mingyu smiling makes him even angrier. With a determined look, he marks the option yes on the trip form. 3 weeks later, the students gather in front of the school for the class trip. Mingyu hugs him and invites him to sit with him, but he says he's going with Jaehui. He asks if the two are dating, making the protagonist even more irritated. The protagonist thinks Mingyu is annoying and wonders why he said that. The boy defends himself, saying he's just curious since they're always together. Hai Seong confronts him, and Mingyu says it's different because they're representatives. He denies that they're dating and says he just feels comfortable with Jaehui. But Jaehui reveals that she's sitting with someone else, leaving Hai Seong surprised. He tries to hide it and says she can sit with Mingyu, who's looking for a seat. A classmate complains that everyone is taking too long to choose seats and tells them to sit down already. The protagonist sits alone and wonders if Jaehyui thinks they're getting too close. He reflects on their friendship and wonders how he can change the situation. Mingyu sits next to him and the two watch their reflections in the bus window. He comments that Jaehyui is sitting with another guy and Hai Seong gets irritated. The bus continues the trip and the classmates talk excitedly about the beach. Mingyu suggests throwing their friends into the water. Hai interrupts him and says he doesn't like those kinds of jokes and won't join in. The protagonist says he'll take a nap and Mingyu watches him thoughtful. When they arrive at the hotel, the teacher tells the class to go to their rooms and rest. The students get excited and Mingyu comments that the room looks normal online. Suddenly he meets the classmate Hai had fought with and greets him, asking if he's unpacked yet. The classmate confirms and Mingyu jokes that his group arrived earlier. The boy stares and Hai Seong looks away, feeling a bit uncomfortable. Mingyu asks why he didn't greet the classmate and he says they're not close. But he says that apparently the blonde one is close to the boy. The classmate reveals that their mothers are friends and that they've known each other since childhood. Mingyu enters the room and Hai Seong thinks he doesn't like the boy at all. Mingyu tells everyone to form two lines and Jaehyui looks at him, a little embarrassed. He asks if she took off her glasses and suggests she do the same tomorrow. Jaehyui slaps him and tells him to stop with his bad jokes. Meanwhile, the protagonist watches her. He pays attention to every movement the class representative makes. At night in the room, the group decides to play truth or dare to pass the time. He refuses and says he's busy, but the friends insist he should join the game. Hai Seong agrees to stay but says he'll wear headphones so he won't hear anything. The friends promise that everything will stay a secret and get ready to start the game. The bottle spins and lands on Mingyu, making everyone excited about the situation. They ask which girl in class he likes, and Mingyu says it's too soon. A friend insists and Mingyu reveals that he's interested in Jaehyui, the class president. Hai Seong hears it and says that's why he's been flirting with her the whole time. The friends tease, calling them the president and vice president couple, saying there's a love triangle. Angry, he removes his headphones and calls out the boys. He asks them if they were talking about him. A classmate apologizes and says they were just joking. The protagonist asks why they'd talk about him since he didn't want to join the game. He asks them not to talk about him anymore and the phone rings, interrupting the conversation. At that moment, the class representative asks to meet him in the hallway, leaving the boys curious. The friends whisper that it's obvious Jaehyui is interested in Hai Seong. They peek through the door and see Hai Seong and Jaehyui talking in the hallway. He asks if something happened and Jaehyui sighs with a worried look. Then she touches the protagonist's head and stays there, caressing him. Jaehyui apologizes and says it was a dare from the truth or dare game. He gets embarrassed and says it's fine, trying to hide his discomfort. In the hallway, a group of girls start laughing as they watch the scene. The mood gets awkward and Jaehyui tells him they should go back to the teacher's room. He asks what the dare was and she says she can't tell because of the rules. The friends peek through the door and say that no way, they're definitely not together. They whisper, saying it's obvious the two are flirting with each other. At night, the protagonist wakes up and looks at his phone with a thoughtful expression. He messages Jaehyui and she promises to tell him if he does well on the exams. At the beach, the teacher asks the class to gather for a group photo. The protagonist drifts off in thought, always watching the girl. They take the photo together and the mood between them feels a bit lighter. Mingyu asks to go into the water but the teacher says it's too cold for that. The friends pick up the class representative and carry her toward the sea, teasing her. She screams for them to stop and the teacher laughs, saying it's good to be young. They throw her into the water. Meanwhile, Hai watches, feeling very uncomfortable. The friends help her out of the water, and she slaps her classmate. The protagonist watches the scene from afar and feels a bit out of place in the group. Mingyu complains that the water is cold but says it'll warm up soon. And there, the group has fun playing in the water. The protagonist stares at the sea, deep in thought. He keeps watching every step of his crush, and ends up getting distracted, startled by something. His classmates grab him and lift him up to throw him into the water too. He screams for them to stop and the water fills with darkness, his eyes full of pure panic. He feels the mermaid's hand pulling him down. In his mind, the sea turns red. He sees those dark strands of hair dragging him into the depths, until a hand touches his back. Mingyu pulls him up and asks why he isn't getting up. With a frightened look, he stares at his friend, not knowing what to say about what happened. Mingyu apologizes and says he didn't know he didn't want to go into the water. His heart races, and he remembers the ghostly hands that pulled him under. Furious, he punches Mingyu and glares at him with pure hatred. The scene shifts to the moving bus. Inside, the teacher talks on the phone and Hai Seong stays silent. He says goodbye to Jaehyui by message and says we'll see each other again in Seoul. His expression is sad because he's been expelled. He sighs and the teacher reveals that Mingyu's nose is broken because of the fight. The man says what he did was serious and that he could be suspended for it. He tells him to apologize to Mingyu before the trip ends. At school, the protagonist's grandmother is present. Soon after, she is introduced to Mingyu's mother, who is also called in. The teacher tells the woman who the grandmother is and also introduces Hai, responsible for the fight. He introduces the school violence counselor and says she'll help resolve the matter. Mingyu's mother says he's recovering at home and that they don't need to worry. She reveals that she talked to her son and that he admitted Hai Seong had been clear. Mingyu's mother says her son forced him into the water even though he didn't want to go. She admits that her son crossed the line and understands why Hai Seong got angry. He wonders if he really needs to apologize. Clutching his pants, he thinks that the friend is taking away his reason to hate him. The mother says she still thinks Hai Seong overreacted and wants to know how he feels. The grandmother encourages him to speak and he stands up with a look of pure determination. He bows and apologizes, but Mingyu's mother interrupts him with a serious look. She says she wants to hear his reason before he apologizes and looks him in the eye. The protagonist stays silent and feels pressured to give an explanation. The grandmother offers to explain the situation. The old lady reveals that his parents drowned in the ocean. She explains that he still takes medication for anxiety and that he felt in danger. He wonders if he needs to use his parents to get out of the situation, feeling guilty. Mingyu's mother thanks them, saying she doesn't want him to be suspended. Neither she nor her son want that to happen, and the grandmother thanks her. And finally, the boy's mother says she knows the school and the grandmother will make sure it doesn't happen again, and says that when Mingyu returns to class they should apologize to each other in person, and she confirms with the protagonist if he's really going to do it. Swallowing his pride, he confirms that yes, he'll apologize to Mingyu. And with that, we wrap up this video. There are more chapters of this story, so if you want a continuation, comment Stalker Mermaid below. The more comments you leave, the higher the chances I'll bring the next part. I'm also going to recommend 2 videos here on the channel that I'm sure you'll enjoy. See you next time, everyone.